Right now, you're trapped. Trapped in overthinking. Trapped in chasing things that never make you happy. Trapped in reacting to life instead of controlling it. And the worst part? You think this is normal. Every day you wake up feeling like something is missing. You scroll, you distract yourself, you chase approval, you avoid discomfort. But deep down, you know you're not living up to your potential. You feel it. That quiet frustration, that nagging voice in the back of your head whispering, "This isn't it." And if you ignore it, if you keep pretending it's fine, one day you'll wake up and realize decades have passed and you never became the person you were meant to be. But today, that changes. Because the truth is, most people will never master their mind. They'll stay stuck, controlled by their emotions, manipulated by others, wasting time on things that don't matter. But a few, a rare few, will break free. They will learn the ancient wisdom of the Stoics and transform their lives forever. Are you one of them? If you're still here, if something inside you refuses to settle for an average life, then keep watching, because once you master these Stoic lessons, nothing will ever shake you again. Let's begin. There's a reason most people never become truly great. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they don't have opportunities, not even because they're lazy. They fail because they crave recognition too soon. They want results now. They want applause before they've done anything remarkable. And that need, that hunger for validation, destroys their growth. The people who truly change, who rise above the noise and build something unshakable, do it in silence. They don't chase attention. They don't beg for approval. They grow slowly, steadily, invisibly, until one day the world is forced to take notice. This is the Stoic way. And if you master it, you will become unstoppable. The problem is, we live in a world that rewards instant gratification. Everyone wants to prove their progress, posting every gym session, announcing every minor achievement, measuring success by how many people notice instead of how much they've actually changed. But real strength, real wisdom, real mastery, it happens where no one can see. It happens in the quiet, in the discipline no one praises, in the sacrifices no one thanks you for. If you can learn to embrace that, to improve without needing recognition, you will surpass everyone who seeks attention instead of transformation. And one day, when people finally notice how much you've changed, they'll ask, "When did this happen?" And you'll smile, because you'll know the truth. People underestimate the power of imperceptible growth because it doesn't feel like progress. When you work in silence, when no one claps for you, when you don't see immediate rewards, your mind whispers, "Why am I even doing this?" This is where most people quit. They expect growth to be dramatic. They want the before and after transformation. They want people to gasp at their progress. But growth that lasts, that becomes permanent, is never loud. It doesn't come in bursts of motivation. It doesn't happen in flashy, overnight success stories. It happens in the small, consistent actions that seem meaningless in the moment, but redefine your entire future. A tree doesn't look like it's growing when you stare at it. A mountain doesn't show signs of change when the wind erodes it grain by grain. But over time, the difference is undeniable. The problem is, people don't have the patience to wait. They expect results immediately. They start something new, a habit, a skill, a discipline, and when they don't see obvious improvement in a few weeks, they assume it's not working. They move on to something else, and then another thing, and another. But those who truly master anything understand the power of compounding effort. They don't measure their growth in days or even months. They think in years. They understand that excellence is not built in breakthroughs, but in the boring, unglamorous work that no one sees. This is why the Stoics didn't seek recognition for their wisdom. They weren't trying to impress anyone. They weren't chasing status or approval. They focused entirely on mastery, on getting better in ways that were real, not just visible. If you want to transform, you must do the same. The hardest part of silent growth is the lack of external validation. When you're working in secret, when no one acknowledges your effort, your mind starts to rebel. You start thinking, what's the point? If no one sees it, does it even matter? This is why most people quit early. They rely on external motivation, on applause, on feedback, on seeing quick progress. And when that disappears, so does their drive. But the moment you stop needing validation, you become untouchable. When your motivation comes from within, nothing can take it from you. You don't slow down because no one is watching. You don't lose momentum because you aren't being praised. You become dangerous because while others get discouraged when their work isn't noticed, you keep going. While they need constant reminders that they're improving, you trust the process. And over time, while they are stuck in cycles of starting and stopping, you are quietly, relentlessly becoming great. This is the Stoic mindset. Do the work. Ignore the noise. Trust the process. Most people will never master this. They will stay addicted to recognition. They will post every small achievement online to get quick validation. They will spend more energy proving they are improving than actually improving. And years from now, when they wonder why their life hasn't changed, they won't realize that they were trapped, enslaved by their need for attention. If you want to be different, you must detach from the need to be seen. Work as if no one will ever notice. Improve as if no one will ever praise you. Become the kind of person who doesn't need applause to keep going. Because when you do, you gain something far more powerful, the ability to grow without limits. One of the biggest reasons people fail at silent growth is their addiction to comparison. They constantly check where they stand against others. They see someone who started after them making more progress, and they feel discouraged. They wonder why they aren't improving as fast. They lose focus on their own journey. But here's the truth. Comparison is a poison that destroys real growth, because the moment you focus on someone else's path, you lose control over your own. The Stoics understood this deeply. Your only competition is yourself. It doesn't matter if someone else is progressing faster. It doesn't matter if they're getting recognition while you're being ignored. The only thing that matters is whether you are better today than you were yesterday. You must train yourself to see growth differently. Stop looking for obvious signs of progress. Stop expecting instant results. Start valuing the small, invisible changes, the ones no one else notices, but that make you stronger, sharper, wiser. Because over time, those are the changes that matter most. Growth that is visible is often growth that fades. Think about it. The people who chase recognition tend to burn out. They make a big announcement about changing their life, then quit after a few months. They seek approval for every minor improvement, then lose motivation when the applause stops. But the people who transform quietly, they become unstoppable. They don't waste energy proving themselves. They don't need anyone to acknowledge their work. And because they are free from distraction, they move faster. They go deeper. They last longer. This is why the greatest warriors, the greatest thinkers, the greatest minds in history, they all mastered the art of imperceptible growth. They trained when no one was watching. They learned when no one was listening. They built their strength in solitude. And when the world finally saw what they had become, it was already too late to stop them. This is the path few will take. But if you have the discipline, if you have the patience, if you can learn to love the process without needing recognition, you will become one of the rarest and most powerful kinds of people in the world. And one day, when people look at you in awe and ask, "How did you do it?" you will know the answer. You did it in silence. Most people wait for disaster to strike before they learn how to handle it. They don't prepare, they don't train, and they don't build resilience until they're already drowning in chaos. And by then, it's too late. They panic, they break, they crumble under the weight of pressure they were never ready for. But those who truly understand life, who refuse to be weak, who refuse to be victims, they build their strength before they need it. They don't wait for hardship to arrive, they prepare for it. They train for the battle before it begins. They develop an unshakable mind while things are still calm. So when the storm comes, they don't just survive, they stand unbroken. This is the difference between those who collapse and those who endure. Most people have no idea how fragile they are. They think they are strong until life proves them wrong. They think they can handle pain, failure, betrayal, loss, until it actually happens, and they realize their mind was never built to withstand it. They are forced to learn strength in the middle of suffering, and for many, that lesson comes too late. They end up stuck in cycles of regret, unable to move forward because they never trained themselves to carry the weight of hardship. This is why preemptive resilience is so rare, because it requires work when there is no immediate threat. It demands effort before there is visible need. And most people will not put in effort for something they don't see coming, but those who do, they become unshakable. There is an ancient truth that people have forgotten. The best time to prepare for war is during peace. You don't sharpen your sword in the middle of battle. You don't build armor after the attack has started. You don't develop resilience while drowning in pain. You develop it long before, so that when life hits, you don't have to scramble for strength. You already have it. The Stoics knew this well. They didn't wait for misfortune to teach them discipline. They practiced hardship while life was easy. They embraced discomfort voluntarily, not because they had to, but because they knew that suffering is inevitable, and the only question is whether you are ready for it when it comes. Most people assume they will rise to the occasion when disaster strikes. They tell themselves they will figure it out when the time comes. But that is a lie. You do not rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your training. When pain arrives, when loss hits, when betrayal wounds you, your default reaction will not be the person you wish you were. It will be the person you have trained yourself to be. And if you have not trained, you will not survive it. The strongest minds in history were built in moments of stillness, not in crisis. The warrior does not wait for the battlefield to learn how to fight. The philosopher does not wait for hardship to learn patience. The master of any craft does not wait for the test to start studying. Yet most people live their lives without preparation, assuming they will figure it out when the moment arrives. They think that suffering itself will make them strong. But suffering alone does not create strength. Preparation does. Training for hardship before it arrives means embracing discomfort before you are forced to. It means practicing loss before you lose, facing rejection before you are rejected, building endurance before you are tested. It means making peace with failure before it happens, learning to function in solitude before loneliness strikes, training your emotions before they are shattered. This is what the Stoics did, and it is why they were unshaken by life's worst moments. Most people believe suffering is something to avoid. They run from it, resist it, and act as if it is something unfair. They assume that life is supposed to be easy, and when it is not, They react with anger and frustration. But those who have prepared for hardship do not see suffering as an enemy. They see it as a teacher. They do not fight against pain. They allow it to forge them into something stronger. They do not waste time feeling sorry for themselves. They use every moment of struggle as a test of their training. The great mistake of the weak is believing that resilience is something you summon in the moment. But resilience is not a reaction. It is a habit. It is something you build every single day through the choices you make. You build it in the moments no one is watching. You build it in the discipline you maintain when no one cares. You build it when you deny yourself comfort, when you push yourself to do what is difficult, when you embrace discomfort by choice instead of waiting for life to force it upon you. True resilience is not about surviving hardship. It is about thriving in it. It is about being the kind of person who does not just endure suffering, but who grows stronger because of it. The weak endure pain and break. The strong endure pain and adapt. The untrained face suffering and collapse under its weight. The trained face suffering and become something even greater than before. Most people do not realize how much their mind controls their life. They think they are just responding to the world, but in reality, they are slaves to their emotions, their fears, and their past. They are controlled by their circumstances instead of being in control of themselves. The strongest minds are not the ones who never feel pain. They are the ones who have trained their minds to be bigger than their pain. They have conditioned themselves to withstand anything. And that kind of strength does not come from wishful thinking. It comes from relentless, intentional preparation. The person who is trained for hardship does not panic when crisis strikes. They do not crumble under pressure because pressure is something they have already faced. They do not let loss destroy them because they have already made peace with loss before it happened. They do not let fear control them because they have already faced fear when nothing was at stake. This is why the Stoics could endure suffering with such calm. They had already experienced it in their minds long before it happened in reality. There is a profound advantage to being prepared while others are weak. When the world crumbles, when people lose control, when chaos erupts, you remain composed. You are not reacting emotionally like the rest. You are not lost in confusion like the untrained. You stand firm because you are ready. This is not arrogance. It is simply the reality of preparation. The mind that has been through war before war begins is the mind that survives it best. Most people seek comfort at every opportunity. They avoid pain. They avoid difficulty. They avoid anything that challenges them. And in doing so, they become fragile. They make themselves weak. They do not realize that their pursuit of comfort is making them unfit for life's unavoidable struggles. Because when the real test comes, when they are truly challenged, when they are confronted with something they cannot escape, they have no strength to stand on. The ones who have trained do not make this mistake. They do not avoid hardship. They seek it. They look for ways to challenge themselves. They practice discomfort on purpose. They wake up early when they don't have to. They exercise when no one is forcing them. They choose discipline over ease, not because it is enjoyable, but because they know that one day life will demand that they be strong. And when that day comes, they will already be ready. This is the paradox of strength. Those who embrace difficulty before they have to are the ones who are least affected by it when it arrives. Those who train for war in times of peace are the ones who walk through chaos with clarity. The ones who avoid struggle, who seek comfort, who refuse to prepare. They are the ones who are broken by the very thing they tried to escape. Most people will never understand this because they do not want to. They want an easy life, a life where nothing challenges them, where they never have to struggle. But those who truly desire greatness do not ask for ease. They ask for preparation. They do not pray for an easy path. They train for the hard one. They do not hope for a future free of hardship. They become the kind of person who can handle anything. And that is the difference between those who are controlled by life and those who control their lives. It is the difference between the weak and the strong, between those who are broken by suffering and those who are forged by it. Most will never choose this path, but those who do, they are the ones who cannot be broken. Most people believe their problems come from the outside world. They blame circumstances, people and events for their suffering, frustration, and unhappiness. They believe if only their situation changed, if only they had more money, better relationships, fewer challenges, then they would finally be at peace. But this is the greatest lie ever told. The truth is, the world does not create your suffering. Your perception does. Nothing has meaning until your mind gives it one. Two people can go through the exact same experience, yet one breaks under the pressure while the other thrives. The difference is not in what happened, but in how it was interpreted. This is not just philosophy. It is the foundation of your reality. Everything you experience, every emotion you feel, every decision you make, it all comes from the meaning you assign to events, not the events themselves. Your perception is the architect of your life, shaping what you see, what you believe, and ultimately what you become. Most people never grasp this truth. They think they are victims of reality, trapped in circumstances beyond their control. They do not see that they are participating in their own suffering by the way they think. They do not realize that by shifting their perception, they can shift their entire existence. This is the radical power of Stoic quantum thinking, the understanding that your mind dictates your world, not the other way around. Those who fail to master their perception remain trapped. They live in cycles of stress, anger, and disappointment because they let external events dictate their inner state. They react without thinking, they assume the worst, and they allow fleeting emotions to shape their decisions. And because they never take control of their perception, their reality never changes. But those who understand this principle become untouchable. They learn to see events not as inherently good or bad, but as neutral forces shaped by interpretation. They train themselves to control the meaning they assign to experiences. And in doing so, they take control of their emotional world. They stop wasting energy fighting things outside their control, and instead reshape their response to them. Reality does not bend to those who complain about it. It bends to those who control the lens through which they see it. Most people misunderstand this concept because they assume it means ignoring reality. They think perception control is about lying to yourself, pretending everything is fine when it isn't. But Stoic quantum thinking is not about delusion. It is about choosing a perspective that empowers you instead of weakens you. It is about refusing to let external forces dictate your internal world. There is no such thing as a good or bad event, only a mind that labels it as such. A failure can be seen as a devastating setback or as valuable feedback. A rejection can be seen as a personal attack or as a redirection toward something better. A crisis can be seen as a catastrophe or as an opportunity for growth. The event does not change, only your interpretation of it does. This is why some people remain bitter after challenges, while others become stronger. It is why some collapse under stress, while others rise. The ones who rise are not luckier, smarter, or more gifted. They simply see differently. They have trained their minds to control their perception instead of letting perception control them. The ancient Stoics mastered this practice by disciplining their minds daily. They questioned their initial emotional reactions. They reframed adversity, and they refused to let circumstances dictate their inner state. They understood that a situation only has as much power as you give it, and that power is entirely within your control. Most people will never reach this level of mastery. They will continue to react without thinking, labeling every hardship as unfair, every discomfort as unbearable, every inconvenience as a personal attack. They will spend their lives consumed by emotions they could have controlled, imprisoned by beliefs they never questioned. But those who do master perception gain a level of control over life that most can't even fathom. They learn to see setbacks as stepping stones, criticism as free insight, discomfort as necessary training. They strip away the illusion that they are powerless and begin to mold reality to their will. This is why two people can experience the same hardship, yet walk away with completely different outcomes. One is shattered, the other is transformed. One sees themselves as cursed, the other sees themselves as tested. One falls apart, the other grows stronger. The event is the same. The only difference is the meaning each person gave it. Most people assume their emotions are automatic. They believe stress, anger, disappointment, and fear are natural reactions to certain situations. But the truth is, these emotions do not arise from events themselves. They arise from the interpretation of events. And because of this, they can be trained, controlled, and redirected. By mastering perception, you take back the power you have unknowingly given away. You no longer depend on things outside of you to determine how you feel. You no longer let people's words, failures, or rejections shake your foundation. You become immune to manipulation because you no longer react impulsively. You stop blaming life for your suffering and start shaping your world from the inside out. This is not just theory. It is the key to emotional resilience. The strongest people are not the ones who avoid hardship, but the ones who train their minds to respond powerfully to it. While others let emotions drive their decisions, they remain composed. While others see obstacles as barriers, they see them as tests of their discipline. While others panic in the face of uncertainty, they remain steady, knowing that their perception is what creates their experience. Most people let the past control them. They replay old failures, past regrets, and painful memories, allowing them to shape their present reality. They do not realize that they are reinforcing their suffering by constantly revisiting it. But those who master perception learn to reinterpret the past in ways that empower them. They extract lessons from pain instead of resentment. They see mistakes as data instead of identity. They shift their focus from what went wrong to what they can do next. This is the reason some people stay stuck while others evolve. The ones who stay stuck anchor themselves to a destructive narrative. They convince themselves that they are defined by their worst moments. They see themselves as victims, incapable of change. The ones who evolve refuse to be limited by past interpretation. They rewrite their internal story, focusing not on what happened, but on how they choose to see it. The mind is not a passive observer. It is an active creator. The thoughts you allow shape the world you experience. If you focus on problems, your world is filled with obstacles. If you focus on possibilities, your world is filled with opportunities. If you see hardship as a curse, you will feel powerless. If you see hardship as preparation, you will feel unstoppable. This is why people who complain remain miserable. Their perception is locked onto what is wrong, so their reality follows. This is why people who expect to fail never succeed. They have already decided how the world works, and the mind simply delivers whatever it is programmed to see. The shift happens when you start questioning everything you assume to be true. Instead of reacting, you pause. Instead of assuming the worst, you challenge it. Instead of reinforcing old narratives, you choose new ones. You stop seeing things as happening to you and start seeing them as happening for you. The world does not change. Circumstances do not change. Other people do not change. The only thing that changes is how you see them. Those who understand this become the architects of their own reality. They refuse to be puppets of emotion. They refuse to let external events dictate their internal state. They create stability from within, making them untouchable by the chaos around them. Most will never reach this level of clarity. They will remain trapped in their automatic responses, prisoners of their own unchecked perception. They will continue believing life is something that happens to them instead of something they shape. But those who do understand this truth, they gain something most people will never experience: the ability to walk through any storm with absolute control. Most people go through life believing that reality is something that happens to them, something external that they must react to. But those who understand perception control know that life does not hand you a fixed narrative. You write it yourself. The meaning you assign to events is what determines whether you feel broken or powerful, whether you see a situation as a setback or an opportunity. But even when you master this skill, even when you train yourself to shape your own reality, there is one thing that remains difficult to escape: the weight of unfinished conversations. Some wounds come from what was said, others come from what was never said. The conversation that ended too soon, the words you never got to say, the apology that never came, the explanation you waited for but never received. The human mind craves completion. It wants resolution, a final answer that will let it close the door and move on. But what happens when that closure never comes? What happens when you are forced to live with loose ends, unanswered questions, and the echoes of words left unspoken? This is where most people become stuck. They believe that until they get that last conversation, that final explanation, they cannot move forward. They tell themselves that their pain will only go away when they have full understanding, when they have a sense of resolution. But this belief is a trap, because the truth is, most closure never arrives. The person who hurt you may never admit what they did. The friend who disappeared may never explain why. The relationship that ended suddenly may never make sense. The betrayal, the misunderstandings, the emotional wounds, they may always remain open-ended. And if you tie your peace to receiving external closure, then peace will never come. This is the fundamental mistake most people make. They believe that closure is something you receive. But the reality is, closure is something you create. You do not need the other person to give you an ending. You do not need the final conversation. You do not need an apology, an explanation, or even acknowledgement. Because if you are waiting for another person to provide your emotional freedom, then you are still giving them control over your life. The Stoics understood this deeply. They did not wait for the world to give them what they needed to move forward. They did not demand explanations, apologies, or perfect conclusions. They mastered the art of moving on without external resolution. And when you learn to do the same, you will never again be trapped by the weight of unfinished conversations. Most people think they need understanding to let go. They assume that if they could just hear the reason why, if they could just know what the other person was thinking, if they could just receive some kind of explanation, then they would finally be able to release the emotional burden. But this is an illusion. Understanding does not erase pain. Answers do not erase disappointment. Even if you were to receive the explanation you crave, it would not change the past. The past remains the same no matter how much clarity you gain. What happened, happened. No amount of knowing will undo it. The only thing that can change is how you choose to relate to it. The only real closure is the one you give yourself. This is why so many people struggle with letting go. They hold on, waiting for the missing piece that will allow them to move forward. But the truth is, there is no missing piece. The only thing missing is the acceptance that closure is not about understanding. It is about deciding that you no longer need to understand. It is about choosing to stop looking for what will never come and shifting your focus to what is still ahead. When you believe that you need a final conversation, you are handing power to someone else. You are saying, "My peace depends on your response." But the strongest people refuse to let their emotional well-being be dictated by others. They do not wait for apologies that may never come. They do not depend on explanations to heal. They do not need external permission to move forward. They decide to move forward. The most dangerous illusion in human relationships is the belief that resolution comes from both sides, that healing requires mutual understanding, that in order for the past to lose its grip, there must be closure from the person who was involved. But this is rarely how life works. People leave without explanation. Friendships dissolve with no real reason. Words are left unsaid. And most of the time, the people who owe you closure are not thinking about it the way you are. This is why the strongest people walk away without needing a final answer. They train themselves to let go, even when they still have questions. They do not allow their peace to be held hostage by another person's choices. They close the chapter on their own terms, and they never let an unfinished story stop them from living fully. Most people never reach this level of strength because they mistake resolution for peace. They assume that once they get the explanation, once they get the final words, once they have a sense of understanding, then they will finally feel free. But peace is not found in answers. It is found in acceptance. There will always be things you do not know. There will always be conversations that ended too soon. There will always be apologies that were never spoken. And waiting for those things will only keep you trapped in a cycle that will never end. The mind creates endless loops when it believes closure is still possible. It replays the conversation that never happened. It imagines different endings. It searches for meaning where none exists. But the past cannot be rewritten. And the moment you understand this, you stop waiting. You stop rehearsing. You stop expecting things to suddenly make sense. You stop looking for peace in something that will never come. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean pretending something did not affect you. It does not mean suppressing emotions. It means choosing not to be defined by what was left unfinished. It means deciding that you do not need every question answered to move forward. It means no longer carrying the emotional burden of what you cannot change. The strongest people in history were not those who received perfect resolutions. They were those who created their own closure. They accepted what was, without needing it to be anything different. They mastered the ability to move forward, even with unanswered questions. And in doing so, they became immune to the emotional traps that keep most people stuck. If you can learn this, you will never again be controlled by unfinished conversations. You will never again wait for another person to provide you with peace. You will never again feel trapped by a past that no longer exists. You will walk away without needing an ending. And once you develop that kind of power, nothing will ever hold you back again. The moment you stop waiting for the world to hand you anything and take full ownership of your life, frustration disappears. You no longer see yourself as a victim of circumstance, but as the architect of your future. This shift is rare because most people cling to the belief that life owes them something: fairness, rewards, recognition. But once you let go of that illusion, you gain something far more powerful: the freedom to create your own path. Most people struggle with this because they secretly want the world to compensate them for their hardships. They expect justice, reciprocity, or at the very least, acknowledgement. And when they don't receive it, they become bitter. They feel cheated, as if life has broken some invisible contract. They spend years trapped in resentment, waiting for fairness that will never come. But those who understand reality do not waste time demanding fairness. They do not expect rewards for their struggles. They do not wait for life to align with their expectations. They adapt. This is where radical self-reliance becomes your greatest weapon. When you stop expecting life to give you anything, you become free to take full control of what is in your hands. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop resenting those who have more. You stop blaming external factors. Instead, you focus all of your energy on what you can build, what you can control, and how you can improve. And in doing so, you develop a power that most people will never experience: the ability to thrive without needing life to be fair. Most people carry invisible chains: the weight of expectation, the burden of entitlement, the resentment that builds when reality does not meet their demands. They go through life believing that because they have suffered, they deserve compensation. That because they work hard, they deserve success. That because they are kind, they deserve kindness in return. But these beliefs only set them up for disappointment. The world does not operate on personal fairness. It operates on cause and effect. If you put in effort, you increase your chances of success, but nothing guarantees it. If you treat people well, you increase the likelihood of good relationships, but no rule says you must receive kindness in return. This is a harsh truth that most people refuse to accept. They want life to work on a fair system, where struggle leads to reward and effort guarantees results. But life is indifferent to fairness. It doesn't adjust itself to match expectations. It doesn't operate on a point system where you accumulate good deeds and exchange them for happiness. And the sooner you accept this, the sooner you can move forward without bitterness, without resentment, and without waiting for justice that will never come. The strongest people in history did not become powerful by demanding fairness. They became powerful because they stopped waiting and started acting. They did not expect help, and when it came, it was a bonus. They did not expect people to understand them, and when they did, it was appreciated but unnecessary. They did not rely on external validation to keep going, because they knew that the only person who could determine their success was themselves. Most people waste years blaming their circumstances, comparing themselves to others, and resenting the fact that life is not evenly distributed. But the people who rise above this are the ones who refuse to let unfairness slow them down. They do not waste time feeling bitter over what they do not have. They do not obsess over what others were given. They take the hand they were dealt and play it better than anyone else. This level of thinking makes you untouchable. When you stop expecting fairness, disappointment disappears. When you stop believing that life owes you something, resentment fades. When you stop waiting for external rewards, you focus all your energy on what you can control. And that shift is what separates those who move forward from those who stay stuck in frustration. Most people fear this level of responsibility because it forces them to admit that their future is entirely in their hands. It is easier to blame society, bad luck, or external obstacles than to take full ownership of their life. But blame is another form of self-imprisonment. The moment you accept that no one is coming to save you, you gain the power to save yourself. This is why radical self-reliance is so rare. Most people are too attached to the idea that they need external support, validation, or approval to succeed. They believe they need the right conditions, the right people, the right opportunities. But those who are truly strong do not depend on external conditions. They create momentum no matter what. Most frustration comes from misplaced expectations. People assume that effort guarantees results. They assume that doing the right thing guarantees a reward. They assume that fairness is a fundamental law. But reality does not care about expectations. Reality responds only to action. The world does not adjust itself to meet personal beliefs. It continues moving, and those who adapt to it succeed, while those who resist it suffer. When you drop entitlement, you become dangerous. You no longer waste time expecting recognition. You no longer feel disappointed when things do not go your way. You no longer let unfairness slow you down. You simply keep going, no matter what. Most people assume that self-reliance means isolation, that rejecting entitlement means becoming cold, detached, or selfish. But this is not about cutting yourself off from others. It is about removing emotional dependency. It's about realizing that while support is valuable, you must never need it to move forward. It's about understanding that while life can be unfair, you are still responsible for your response to it. The moment you fully accept this, you stop being controlled by external circumstances. You stop waiting for permission, validation, or perfect conditions. You stop expecting people to treat you a certain way. You stop demanding fairness from a world that was never built to provide it. And in that moment, you become free. Most people will never reach this level of thinking because they are too emotionally attached to fairness. They want to believe that life should reward effort. They want to believe that justice will eventually balance the scales. They want to believe that their struggles will one day be compensated. But these beliefs only create disappointment. When you expect nothing, you are never disappointed. When you believe that no one owes you anything, you never feel robbed. When you stop expecting life to be fair, you stop wasting time wishing things were different and start focusing on what you can control. The strongest people are not those who receive the most. They are those who need the least. They do not wait for motivation to take action. They do not wait for recognition to feel validated. They do not wait for the right conditions to move forward. They create their own momentum, and because of that, they are never dependent on anything external. Most people avoid this mindset because it forces them to take full responsibility for their future. It forces them to let go of excuses. It forces them to stop blaming circumstances. It forces them to acknowledge that if they want something, they must create it themselves. But once you accept this, frustration disappears. You stop feeling that the world is against you. You stop seeing obstacles as unfair. You stop believing that you're owed anything. And instead, you focus on building yourself into someone so strong that none of it matters. This is the highest level of freedom. Not the freedom to receive, but the freedom to act without needing anything in return. The freedom to move forward without waiting for permission. The freedom to be unfazed by rejection, setbacks, or lack of recognition. The freedom to stop expecting, stop resenting, and start building. The world does not owe you fairness, success, love, or happiness. And that is the greatest gift you will ever receive. Because once you understand that nothing is coming to save you, you finally gain the power to save yourself. The moment you stop expecting the world to give you anything, you become free. But there is another form of slavery most people don't even realize they are trapped in: the invisible chains of social conditioning. Most people believe they are making independent choices, living according to their own values, and shaping their lives based on personal decisions. But beneath the surface, they are puppets, moving to the silent pull of strings they cannot see. These strings dictate what they desire, what they fear, what they believe is possible. They control how they define success, how they measure their worth, and how they react to judgment. Every thought, every action, every goal, most of it has been subtly placed in their minds by the environment they grew up in. Family, culture, media, education, peer influence, all of these forces shape people long before they ever question whether they truly agree with what they have been taught. And for most, that questioning never happens. People live their entire lives chasing things they never truly wanted, believing in ideas they never examined, and measuring themselves against standards they never chose. They pursue careers to impress society. They adopt opinions because they are socially acceptable. They fear stepping outside the norm because they have been conditioned to equate approval with security. This is not freedom. This is not self-determination. This is being controlled without realizing it. Breaking free from social conditioning is rare because it requires the courage to dismantle everything you have ever believed. It demands looking at your own thoughts, habits, and aspirations and asking, did I choose this? Or was this chosen for me? It requires rejecting the comforting illusion that the way things are is the way they should be. And most people are unwilling to do this because it forces them to take responsibility for their own minds. Social conditioning is powerful because it operates in the shadows. It does not need to force obedience. It only needs to make you believe that obedience is your own idea. If people openly felt controlled, they would rebel. But when control is invisible, they comply without resistance. They live their lives trying to meet expectations they never set. They measure their worth through comparisons they never questioned. They judge success based on a definition they never wrote. And they do all of this believing it is their own free will. This is why so many people feel an unexplainable sense of emptiness despite doing everything right. They follow the blueprint handed to them by society: education, career, marriage, financial stability, social approval. Yet something feels off. They cannot pinpoint why, but deep down, they know they are not truly living for themselves. Their choices are not their own. Their desires are not organic. Their fears are not natural, but implanted. They are living a script written by others, yet they think they are in control. Escaping this trap starts with one realization: most of what you believe about yourself and the world is not actually yours. Your fears, your ambitions, your opinions, many of them were not born from your own observations, but were programmed into you. And if you do not actively dismantle that programming, you will live as a reflection of society's influence, rather than as an authentic version of yourself. One of the strongest forces of conditioning is the need for external validation. Most people's behavior is not shaped by personal conviction, but by the fear of judgment. They hesitate to express themselves because they worry about how they will be perceived. They seek approval, not because they need it, but because they have been conditioned to equate validation with worth. They chase status, not because it fulfills them, but because they have been taught that success is meaningless unless others acknowledge it. And because this conditioning happens early in life, they never question it. Breaking free requires the ability to detach from the fear of disapproval. It requires understanding that no matter what you do, someone will always disapprove, and that their opinion has no real effect on your life, unless you allow it to. The strongest minds in history were not shaped by seeking validation. They were shaped by ignoring it. They did not waste time trying to fit into molds designed by others. They refused to let external opinions dictate their actions. And because of that, they became immune to the invisible forces that control most people. Another layer of conditioning comes from cultural and societal expectations. Every society has unspoken rules about what is acceptable, what is respectable, and what is shameful. These rules dictate everything: how people dress, how they interact, what they value, and what they suppress. But these rules are not universal truths. They are arbitrary agreements formed by collective habits, traditions, and power structures. Yet most people treat them as sacred laws. They assume that because society expects something, it must be correct. But social norms are not absolute truths. They are frameworks built for conformity. And while some norms serve practical purposes, many exist simply to enforce control. They keep people predictable, manageable, and easily influenced. They instill fear of standing out, making people regulate themselves before any external force has to intervene. And because the fear of rejection is so deeply ingrained, most never step outside the boundaries of what is socially acceptable. True independence means recognizing that societal expectations are suggestions, not commands. It means realizing that just because something is common does not mean it is correct. It means being willing to discard traditions, beliefs, and behaviors that do not align with your principles. And most importantly, it means never mistaking social approval for personal fulfillment. Breaking free from conditioning also means reassessing your definition of success. Most people are chasing goals that were assigned to them by external influences. They measure their achievements based on financial wealth, professional status, or public recognition, not because these things genuinely fulfill them, but because they were taught to believe they should. They pursue material success, not because it brings happiness, but because society glorifies it. They aim for stability, not because it makes them feel alive, but because they were trained to fear uncertainty. But real success cannot be defined externally. It cannot be measured by social comparison. It is entirely personal. It is about creating a life that aligns with your deepest values, regardless of whether anyone else approves. And this is why most people remain trapped. They are too afraid to redefine success in their own terms, because it means stepping away from the validation they have been conditioned to seek. Breaking free means questioning everything. It means dismantling every belief that has been placed in your mind and re-evaluating it from the ground up. It means looking at your desires and asking, did I choose this, or was I taught to want this? It means stripping away every external influence until you are left with nothing but your true self. Most people will never do this. They will continue living as extensions of their environment, unaware of the invisible forces shaping their thoughts. They will keep measuring themselves against external standards. They will keep fearing judgment. They will keep chasing approval. And in doing so, they will remain puppets, controlled by forces they never examined. But those who do the work to free themselves become immune to external control. They stop caring about fitting in. They stop measuring their worth through others' eyes. They stop reacting based on fear of rejection. They make decisions not based on what is expected, but based on what is authentic. And in doing so, they become something most people never will: truly free. Most people are prisoners of time without realizing it. They rush through life, always looking ahead, always chasing the next moment, yet feeling like time is slipping away faster than they can grasp it. Weeks blur into months, years vanish without warning, and before they can process where they are, life has moved forward without them. They tell themselves that someday they will slow down, that someday they will feel present, that someday they will truly experience their lives. But that day never comes, because they have been conditioned to exist everywhere except in the moment they are in. The mind is constantly pulled between the past and the future. It replays old mistakes, lingers on regrets, and fixates on things that cannot be changed. At the same time, it obsesses over what's next, worrying about outcomes, planning for the future, and constantly seeking the next event, the next goal, the next milestone. And in this endless oscillation between what was and what will be, the only thing that actually exists, the present moment, is ignored. Time feels like it is moving too fast because they are never truly in it. This is where the power of presence comes in. Most people assume that time is fixed, that every second passes at the same rate for everyone. But this is an illusion. Time is not something that happens to you. It is something that is experienced through your awareness. And because of that, your perception of time can be controlled. People often say that childhood felt endless, while adulthood feels like it is speeding by. This is not because time has changed, but because their minds have changed. When they were children, everything was new. Every experience was unfamiliar, requiring full attention. Every day felt rich with discovery. There was no past to dwell on and no future to anxiously anticipate. They lived fully in each moment, and because of that, time felt abundant. But as they grew older, they became numb to their own experiences. Life became repetitive. Their days became routines, their minds preoccupied with memories and worries rather than with what was in front of them. The present became something to endure rather than something to experience. The Stoics understood this problem long before modern psychology confirmed it. They knew that most people were living absent-mindedly, disconnected from their own existence, letting time slip away unnoticed. They saw how people wasted years by either regretting the past or fearing the future, rarely pausing to fully absorb the present. And so they trained themselves to master presence. They practiced the art of experiencing every moment completely, not as a passive observer, but as an active participant. And in doing so, they discovered something profound. When you master presence, time slows down. Most people believe they do not have enough time, but the real problem is that they are not truly in the time they have. Their days feel rushed because they are mentally elsewhere. Their years feel like a blur because they were never fully engaged in them. They assume they are busy, but most of their time is spent distracted. They assume they are living, but most of their energy is consumed by thoughts that remove them from life itself. Mastering presence does not mean forcing time to slow down. It means experiencing time differently. It means shifting from merely existing in moments to actually living them. It means breaking free from autopilot, where the mind is lost in thought, and instead bringing full awareness to everything that is happening right now. It means experiencing life not as a collection of passing events, but as an immersive reality that is unfolding in real time. Most people have brief glimpses of presence, often during heightened emotional moments, a near-death experience, a deep conversation, an intense challenge. These moments force the mind into the present because they demand full attention. But outside of these rare instances, people drift. They scroll mindlessly. They eat without tasting their food. They hold conversations without actually listening. They go through routines without absorbing any detail. They live disconnected from the richness of the present, and as a result, time feels empty, fleeting, and unsatisfying. The greatest tragedy is that people do not realize how much life they are missing. They assume that because they are physically present, they are experiencing their days. But presence is not about physical location, it is about mental engagement. And most people are absent from their own lives, lost in distractions, consumed by external noise, barely aware of what is happening right in front of them. Mastering presence requires retraining the mind to exist in real time, rather than constantly projecting forward or backward. It means fully engaging in experiences without the mental clutter that diminishes them. It means noticing details, absorbing sensations, paying attention to the subtle richness of life that most people ignore. When you do this, time expands. What once felt like a fleeting moment becomes immersive. What once passed unnoticed becomes deeply meaningful. A single conversation, a quiet moment, a simple activity, when fully experienced, feels longer and more profound than an entire week lived in distraction. The most powerful way to slow down time is to increase depth of experience. When something is fully felt, it stretches within the mind. A single hour spent in full presence feels longer and richer than an entire day spent in distraction. This is why people feel like time slows down during moments of deep focus, creativity, or awe. Their attention is fully immersed in the present, and because of that, they experience time differently. Most people let life pass by unnoticed because they have conditioned themselves to chase the next thing. They rush through activities just to complete them. They experience events just to move on to the next one. They consume entertainment, conversations, and even relationships passively, as if they are background noise rather than the substance of life itself. But nothing changes until they choose to be present. The moment presence is mastered, time is no longer something to be managed. It becomes something to be lived. It is no longer about rushing, planning, or regretting. It is about fully absorbing the now. This is the true secret of slowing down time, not by changing how fast it moves, but by changing how deeply you experience it. People waste years waiting for the perfect moment to slow down, waiting for the right circumstances to fully enjoy life. But presence does not happen someday. It happens right now, in this moment, in this breath, in this experience. And the sooner people understand this, the sooner they will stop watching their lives slip by unnoticed. This is the art of Stoic time alchemy, the ability to elongate meaningful experiences, to create depth where others see repetition, to make every moment feel full rather than fleeting. The power to slow down time has never been in controlling the clock. It has always been in controlling your mind. And those who master it will live lifetimes within moments, while others spend their entire existence wondering where the time went. Time is not something to be controlled, but something to be experienced fully. The same principle applies to influence. Most people believe that persuasion comes from force, from pushing their ideas until others surrender. But real influence is not about insistence. It is about mastering detachment. The more you try to force an outcome, the more resistance you create. The more you chase control, the further it slips away. True power comes not from demanding, but from understanding how to shape an environment where the result unfolds naturally. People waste energy trying to bend others to their will. They argue, insist, repeat themselves, and push their opinions with urgency, assuming that pressure creates persuasion. But this approach only breeds opposition. The more aggressive the attempt, the more defensive people become. The harder you try to change someone, the more they resist change. Influence does not work through force, it works through non-insistence. The greatest persuaders in history were not those who demanded obedience, but those who created an atmosphere where others arrived at conclusions on their own. Most fail at influence because they misunderstand its nature. They believe that to be effective, they must overpower, debate, and insist until they get their way. But this approach is self-defeating. Influence does not work by pulling, it works by positioning. The strongest leaders, the most persuasive thinkers, and the most impactful individuals do not force people to listen. They make people want to listen. They do not push their ideas aggressively. They allow their presence, wisdom, and example to do the work. Persuasion through detachment is powerful because it removes desperation. When people sense that you need them to agree, that you are invested in their response, they instinctively push back. The fear of being controlled triggers resistance. But when you communicate without attachment to the outcome, when you express ideas without trying to force agreement, people feel safe to consider what you are saying. They listen, not because they are being pressured, but because the absence of pressure allows them to process information without defense. Most people approach influence with urgency. They believe they must convince others immediately, that they must force a decision in the moment. This impatience weakens their position. The most persuasive individuals understand that timing is everything. A person convinced today under pressure will likely revert to their old thinking tomorrow. But a person who arrives at a conclusion organically will stand by it with conviction. The art of non-insistence is the ability to plant ideas without needing them to take root immediately. It is the ability to introduce a perspective, then step back and allow time to do the convincing. Detachment does not mean passivity. It does not mean withdrawing or failing to express your ideas. It means removing the emotional need for validation, the attachment to whether others accept or reject what you say. When you no longer require agreement to feel secure in your stance, you communicate from a place of confidence rather than insecurity. And this confidence, this quiet certainty, is what makes others listen. Most arguments are lost before they even begin because they start from the wrong mindset. When people try to convince, they enter discussions prepared to fight. They defend their views as if they are under attack. This posture makes them rigid, unable to adjust or adapt. But influence is not about being the loudest. It is about being the most composed. A person who is unshaken, who presents their ideas with calm certainty, creates an undeniable presence. They do not engage in emotional battles because they do not need to. They state their case, then let the power of their words work over time. The strongest communicators in history understood this principle. They did not beg for agreement. They did not waste time trying to convert those who were unwilling to listen. They spoke, then let silence do the rest. They focused not on overpowering, but on positioning themselves so well that their influence was inevitable. The Stoics practiced this art deeply. They did not insist that others adopt their philosophy. They simply lived in a way that made others take notice. Their presence itself became the persuasion. Non-insistence is also the key to negotiation. The moment one side shows desperation, the other gains control. A person who communicates with detachment maintains power in every exchange. They are not reactive. They do not argue out of emotion. They do not chase agreements. They state their position, then allow the other person to reveal their own stance. This creates a dynamic where influence is exerted not through force, but through strategic silence, patience, and control over one's own emotions. People assume that pushing harder leads to results, but in reality, the more pressure you apply, the more friction you create. Influence works best when there is space, when an idea is given room to settle, when there is no urgency, no tension, no demand for an immediate reaction. This is why persuasion through non-insistence is so powerful. It removes resistance before it has a chance to build. Most people never develop this skill because they are ruled by their desire for control. They cannot handle the discomfort of waiting. They need immediate agreement. They cannot stand the uncertainty of an unresolved discussion. This emotional attachment makes them weak. It makes them push too hard, speak too much, and appear desperate for approval. But those who master detachment hold the true power. They understand that influence is not something to be forced. It is something to be earned through patience, clarity, and self-restraint. In every discussion, negotiation, or interaction, the one who is least emotionally invested in the outcome holds the advantage. The person who does not insist, who does not need to be right, who does not demand agreement, creates an aura of quiet confidence. And that confidence is what persuades far more than any argument ever could. This is why the Stoics were not preachers, why they did not force their philosophy on others. They lived it, and in doing so, they influenced without effort. They did not chase agreement, yet they were widely followed. They did not demand that others adopt their views, yet their ideas shaped history. They understood that real influence is not about how hard you push. It is about how deeply you embody your principles. Non-insistence is what makes a person unshakable. It removes the desperate need to convince. It eliminates emotional dependence on others' responses. It shifts persuasion from an act of force to an act of positioning. And once mastered, it ensures that your words, actions, and presence carry more weight than any argument ever could. The ability to influence without force is a skill that few master. It requires discipline, patience, and a deep understanding of human nature. But there is another battle that most people never even realize they are fighting. The battle against their own internal noise. The constant stream of unnecessary thoughts, endless overanalysis, self-doubt, and mental clutter that drains energy without producing clarity. The mind, when undisciplined, becomes its own worst enemy, filling every moment with distractions, worries, and noise that make it impossible to focus. Most people suffer not because of external problems, but because their own minds refuse to be still. They overthink past mistakes, worry about the future, and get caught in a cycle of analyzing situations that do not need analysis. They replay old conversations, anticipate imaginary conflicts, and create stories in their heads that never become reality. Their mental energy is consumed by thoughts that serve no purpose, leaving them exhausted before they have even taken action. The weight of these unnecessary thoughts slows them down, making it harder to make decisions, stay focused, and respond to life with clarity. The mind is supposed to be a tool, something that helps navigate the world with logic and awareness. But for most, it has become an untrained force that works against them, filling every silent moment with distractions, doubts, and noise. The inability to control internal dialogue is why people struggle with focus. It is why they feel mentally drained despite having done nothing physically demanding. It is why they find it difficult to be present, because their mind is always elsewhere, running in loops of useless thoughts that do not change reality. Most frustration, anxiety, and hesitation do not come from real obstacles, but from an overcrowded mind. The more thoughts there are, the harder it is to make sense of anything. The more noise there is, the harder it is to hear the thoughts that actually matter. And because most people never train themselves to silence the unnecessary, they remain trapped in cycles of mental exhaustion, unable to focus deeply on anything meaningful. The strongest minds in history were not those that thought the most, but those that thought the least, yet with absolute precision. They removed distractions. They cut away the excess. They stripped their thinking down to its purest form. They were not caught in loops of self-doubt or over-analysis. When they thought clearly, and when they acted with certainty. This is the skill that separates those who move through life with confidence from those who are paralyzed by indecision. It is not intelligence that makes a person strong. It is the ability to control thought, to think only when necessary, to eliminate the useless, to train the mind to be still when stillness is needed, and sharp when precision is required. Most people assume that more thinking leads to better decisions, but this is false. More thinking often leads to hesitation, doubt, and unnecessary complications. The greatest thinkers in history were not those who overloaded their minds with thoughts, but those who had mastered the art of focusing only on what mattered. They trained themselves to cut through the noise. The mind produces an endless stream of thoughts by default. It analyzes things that do not need analysis. It replays memories that no longer exist. It anticipates problems that may never happen, and if left unchecked, this flood of thoughts weakens decision-making, slows down action, and drains mental energy. The more unnecessary thoughts you have, the harder it is to see things as they are. The more cluttered the mind, the less effective it becomes. The ability to think fewer, sharper thoughts is not about suppressing thinking. It is about disciplining it. It is about recognizing when a thought is useful and when it is just mental noise. It is about training yourself to engage only with what serves a purpose and letting go of everything else. This skill is what makes great strategists, disciplined leaders, and powerful thinkers stand out. They do not waste energy on thoughts that do not matter. They do not allow their minds to be filled with unnecessary clutter. They think with precision, speak with clarity, and act with confidence. Most people suffer because they allow every thought to have power. They react to every worry, analyze every doubt, engage with every mental distraction. But the mind is like a sword. It must be sharpened and controlled. If it's left untamed, it swings wildly, cutting into everything, including itself. But if it's disciplined, it becomes the most powerful weapon a person can wield. Eliminating internal noise requires awareness. Most people do not even realize how much mental energy they waste on thoughts that serve no purpose. They assume that because a thought appears, it must be entertained. But the mind generates thousands of thoughts per day, and most of them are irrelevant. They do not need to be processed. They do not need to be analyzed. They do not need attention. They can simply be ignored. This is the difference between those who are mentally exhausted and those who remain clear-headed. The exhausted ones engage with every thought. The clear-headed ones let unnecessary thoughts pass without reaction. They do not waste time analyzing things that do not require analysis. They do not allow small distractions to occupy their minds. They do not dwell on things that cannot be changed. The greatest power is the ability to control focus. Those who master this skill experience life differently. They are not drained by overthinking. They are not slowed down by hesitation. They are not consumed by inner dialogue that does nothing but confuse and delay. They move with efficiency, act with clarity, and think with purpose. Most people are unaware of how much mental clutter they carry. They assume that feeling mentally exhausted is normal. But mental exhaustion does not come from thinking. It comes from thinking about the wrong things. It comes from overloading the mind with useless thoughts. It comes from engaging in unnecessary internal conversations that add nothing to reality. The strongest minds are not those that think more, but those that think better. Cutting away the excess is a skill that requires training. It means developing the ability to recognize when a thought is worth engaging and when it is just mental noise. It means becoming aware of the unnecessary repetition of thoughts that do not lead to action. It means shutting down distractions before they take hold. And most importantly, it means learning how to be comfortable in silence. Most people fear silence because they are so used to noise. They feel uncomfortable when the mind is not filled with thoughts. But silence is where clarity is found. Silence is where real intelligence emerges. Those who learn to sit in silence without feeling the need to fill it with mental chatter are the ones who develop the sharpest minds. Mental clarity is a choice. Most people assume that they have no control over their thoughts. They believe that whatever enters their mind must be processed. But this is false. The mind can be trained. It can be disciplined. It can be refined. And once that discipline is in place, thinking becomes an act of precision rather than an uncontrolled flood of information. Most people go through life with minds that are loud, cluttered, and chaotic. They assume that because they are always thinking, they are being productive. But in reality, they are draining themselves. They are exhausting their mental energy on things that do not matter. They are drowning in noise, unable to hear the thoughts that actually do. The greatest strength is not in thinking more, but in thinking only what is necessary. The ability to eliminate distractions, focus only on what matters, and cut through mental clutter is what separates the weak from the strong. Those who develop this skill move through life with ease. They are not burdened by hesitation. They are not slowed down by doubt. They are not controlled by thoughts that serve no purpose. They see the world clearly, act decisively, and remain mentally sharp in every situation. The battle against internal noise is an unseen one. It does not happen in the physical world, but its effects shape everything. Those who master it gain the power of unshakable focus. Those who ignore it remain trapped in a storm of useless thoughts, unable to move forward with clarity. And in the end, the ability to think fewer, sharper thoughts is what determines whether a person controls their mind or is controlled by it. A mind that is free from internal noise is a mind that cannot be controlled. It is focused, deliberate, and sharp, cutting through distractions and illusions. But mental clarity alone is not enough. Influence is not just about thinking better, it is about knowing when to act and when to step back. Most people believe that being seen, being vocal, being constantly present is what gives them power. But true power often comes from disappearance. The ability to step back, to become elusive, to remove oneself strategically is what creates the most lasting influence. People who are always available, always speaking, always seeking attention become predictable. Their presence loses weight because it is overused. Their words lose impact because they are too frequent. Their influence weakens because they are too common. The mind instinctively values what is scarce, and those who understand this use it to their advantage. They do not waste their presence. They do not overexpose themselves. They create mystery, distance, and in doing so, they command more respect than those who constantly seek attention. Most never realize this because they are trapped in the belief that visibility equals power. They think that to influence, they must be seen, that to lead, they must always speak, that to be respected, they must constantly prove themselves. But the opposite is true. The most respected individuals in history were not those who spoke the most, but those who spoke when it mattered. They were not the ones always in the spotlight, but the ones who chose their moments carefully. Being seen less does not mean hiding. It does not mean avoiding responsibility or being passive. It means using presence as a tool, not a habit. It means knowing when to engage and when to retreat. It means understanding that scarcity increases value. The less people see you, the more they notice when you appear. The less they hear from you, the more weight your words carry when you speak. This is why the most powerful individuals in history were often the most elusive. They were not always available. They were not easily reached. They did not chase attention. They let attention come to them. Most people weaken themselves by being too accessible. They share too much, appear too often, and in doing so, they make themselves ordinary. They drain their presence by overusing it, unaware that real power comes from withholding, not giving freely. The ability to step back, to retreat when necessary, to create absence rather than overexposure, is what separates those who command respect from those who beg for it. Strategic disappearance is about creating space. When someone is always present, they become part of the background. They are no longer noticed. But when someone steps away, when they become less available, when they remove themselves from unnecessary situations, they create an energy of importance. People begin to wonder where they are, what they are thinking, why they are absent. Their presence, once taken for granted, becomes valued. Influence is not about forcing people to listen. It is about making them want to listen. It is not about demanding attention. It is about making attention gravitate toward you. Those who master this do not chase influence. They create an aura that pulls people in. They do not have to shout to be heard. Their silence speaks louder than words. Most are afraid of disappearing because they equate absence with weakness. They fear being forgotten. They fear losing relevance. But presence without purpose is weakness. The more a person is seen without reason, the less impact they have. The most influential people in history were not those who were constantly visible, but those who chose their moments. They stepped back to preserve their presence. They disappeared to increase their influence. Disappearance is a weapon. It creates intrigue, builds anticipation, and forces people to notice. The Stoics understood this well. They knew that constant exposure made a person ordinary. They saw that stepping back allowed for greater control. They practiced deliberate absence, not as an escape, but as a strategy. By removing themselves from unnecessary discussions, avoiding trivial conflicts, and stepping away when their presence was not needed, they increased their authority rather than diminished it. A person who is always seen is expected. A person who is rarely seen is remembered. When you are always present, people assume they will see you again. There is no urgency to listen, no weight to your words, no scarcity to your presence. But when you disappear strategically, when you remove yourself from constant exposure, you become a force rather than a fixture. Stepping back also allows for control. When a person is too involved, they become reactive. They are pulled into unnecessary discussions, forced into responses, and weakened by the constant need to prove themselves. But when a person removes themselves, they gain perspective. They become observers rather than participants. They choose their battles instead of being dragged into them. They remain in control rather than controlled. This is why the most powerful leaders do not respond to everything. They do not argue over every detail. They do not waste their presence in situations that do not require them. They remain unpredictable. They move when necessary, but when there is no need to engage, they vanish. This keeps them in a position of control. They do not waste energy. They do not allow others to dictate their presence. They decide when and where they appear, and because of this, their presence is always felt. Most people talk too much, show up too often, and drain their own influence by being everywhere. They assume that always being present makes them valuable, but value is not created by overexposure. It is created by limiting access. The greatest power is not in speaking constantly, but in choosing when to speak. It is not in being available at all times, but in being selective with your presence. Those who master the art of disappearance do not fear being forgotten. They understand that the less they are seen, the more they are valued. The less they explain themselves, the more their words are respected. The less they chase attention, the more influence they hold. They do not prove themselves through visibility. They prove themselves by controlling their presence. Most will never understand this because they are afraid to step back. They fear that if they are not constantly seen, they will become irrelevant. But influence is not about being seen. It is about being remembered. It isn't about showing up everywhere. It is about showing up where it matters. The ability to disappear strategically is what separates the forgettable from the unforgettable. The ones who waste their presence will always be overlooked. The ones who guard their presence will always be valued. Those who remove themselves when necessary, who create space rather than fill every gap, who refuse to be predictable, will always have more influence than those who chase attention. This is the power of stepping back, not as an act of avoidance, but as a deliberate move, not as a weakness, but as a strategy, not out of fear, but out of mastery. Those who understand this become forces of influence. Those who ignore it become background noise. And in the end, it is not the loudest voice that is remembered. It is the voice that speaks only when necessary. Mastering the art of stepping back makes a person untouchable. When they control their presence, they control perception. They are not weakened by overexposure, nor are they controlled by the need for validation. But there's another, deeper trap that keeps most people enslaved: the endless pursuit of manufactured desires. Society has programmed people to chase things they never questioned, to want things they never truly examined, to measure their success based on illusions they never defined for themselves. They believe they are making independent choices, but their desires have been implanted long before they were even aware of them. Most spend their entire lives chasing what they were taught to want. They pursue careers they never questioned, wealth they never truly examined, lifestyles they assumed would bring happiness. They think they are acting out of free will, but their desires are the result of conditioning, repetition, and external influence. They have been programmed to believe that happiness comes from achievement, that status defines worth, that acquiring more will finally bring contentment. But no matter how much they gain, they remain unsatisfied. The reason is simple: they are chasing something that was never real to begin with. Most dissatisfaction does not come from a lack of success. It comes from pursuing things that do not align with real needs. People feel empty after achieving their goals because they were never their own goals in the first place. They were borrowed from culture, absorbed from media, influenced by marketing, and reinforced by social expectations. They spend decades climbing a ladder, only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. They assume that their lack of fulfillment means they need more, that they should chase harder, that the problem is not in what they are pursuing, but in how much of it they have. But the truth is far simpler. They were never chasing what they actually wanted. Desire, when left unexamined, is a prison. It makes people believe that happiness is always just out of reach, that if they can just get a little more money, a little more recognition, a little more status, then they will finally feel complete. But no matter how much they accumulate, the feeling never arrives. The goalposts move. The next thing becomes the new target. The cycle never ends because it was designed not to end. This is the foundation of modern dissatisfaction, keeping people locked in a state of wanting, making them believe they are incomplete without something more, convincing them that they are always one step away from real fulfillment. But those who understand this deception break free. They stop chasing what they were told to want. They strip away the false desires and uncover what truly matters. And in doing so, they gain a power that most never experience, the power to be content, unshaken, and in control of their own lives. Breaking free from manufactured desires requires questioning every ambition, every craving, every pursuit. It means asking, do I want this because it fulfills me, or because I was told it should? It means deconstructing the thoughts that lead to discontent. Most believe that acquiring something will bring peace, but the strongest individuals recognize that peace comes from needing less, not gaining more. The mind that is free from unnecessary desire is a mind that cannot be manipulated. It is a mind that does not chase, does not compare, and does not depend on external validation. Society thrives on keeping people unsatisfied. It tells them they need to look a certain way, own certain things, live a specific lifestyle. It makes them believe that their value is tied to their possessions, that their worth is measured by external achievements. And because this conditioning begins early, most never question it. They assume that their desires are their own, that they are pursuing things because they genuinely want them. But they have been trained to mistake impulse for fulfillment, acquisition for happiness, validation for meaning. Marketing is designed to manufacture dissatisfaction. It convinces people they are lacking, that they need something to feel whole. It attaches emotions to products, creating artificial connections between material things and deep human needs. It tells people that beauty means self-worth, that luxury means success, that approval means happiness. And because most never analyze these messages, they internalize them as truth. They believe that their restlessness can be solved by acquiring more. But the strongest individuals reject this illusion. They see through the game. They recognize that the only way to win is not to play. True fulfillment comes from clarity, knowing what actually matters. The moment a person stops chasing programmed desires, they stop being controlled. They no longer need approval. They no longer seek recognition. They no longer measure themselves by external standards. They remove themselves from the race, not because they cannot compete, but because they recognize that winning a meaningless game is still meaningless. Minimalism is not about having less. It is about wanting less. It is about clearing the mind of false needs, eliminating unnecessary goals, cutting away everything that does not serve real purpose. When a person does this, they experience something that most never will: contentment without conditions. They no longer need to reach a milestone to feel whole. They no longer need external rewards to feel at peace. They are free because they are no longer controlled by things outside of themselves. Most people believe they are unhappy because they have not yet reached their goal. But the real reason they are unhappy is that they have never questioned why that goal exists in the first place. They assume that if they just keep chasing, keep working, keep accumulating, they will eventually feel satisfied. But the truth is that desire itself is the source of suffering. The more a person wants, the more they feel like they lack. The more they compare, the more they feel behind. The more they seek, the more restless they become. The strongest minds understand that true power is not in having, but in not needing. They are immune to marketing. They are unaffected by trends. They do not care for superficial validation. They see through the illusion that more will make them happy. And because of this, they operate on a different level. They are not controlled by impulse, not influenced by external pressure, not defined by possessions or achievements. They own their desires rather than being owned by them. People who are constantly seeking more are easy to manipulate. They can be convinced to chase, to buy, to conform, to sacrifice their peace for things they do not need. But a person who has mastered their desires cannot be moved. They do not feel lacking. They do not crave what society tells them to crave. They are untouchable because nothing external controls them. To break free from this cycle, a person must start questioning everything. They must strip away the layers of programming that have shaped their desires. They must examine every goal and ask, does this truly bring fulfillment? Or have I just been told that it should? They must let go of the illusion that acquiring more will bring peace. Because the truth is that peace is already within them. It has only been buried under layers of false wants. The mind that is no longer trapped by unnecessary desire becomes light. It moves through life with ease, unaffected by comparison, unbothered by trends, uninterested in validation. It no longer spends energy chasing illusions. It no longer feels restless, no longer feels that something is missing, because nothing is missing. Most will never experience this because they are too attached to their programming. They do not want to let go of their illusions because they fear that without them, life will feel empty. But the irony is that letting go is what removes emptiness. The fewer unnecessary desires a person has, the more they appreciate what already exists. They see beauty in what is, rather than in what could be. They find meaning in the present, rather than in an imagined future. They are content, not because they have everything, but because they need very little. Breaking free from manufactured desires is the ultimate act of self-mastery. It is what separates those who are ruled by impulse from those who control their own minds. Those who never question their desires will remain trapped in an endless cycle of wanting, never satisfied, always restless. But those who deconstruct their desires, strip away the illusions and remove everything unnecessary will experience something most never do: freedom from the need for more. Letting go of false desires is the first step toward freedom. But even after breaking free from programmed wants, there is another force that keeps people trapped: resistance, the constant internal fight against reality, the refusal to accept what is, the mental struggle against things that cannot be changed. This battle is not dramatic or obvious. It happens in the smallest, most ordinary moments. It builds up in frustration, irritation, tension, and stress. And if left unchecked, it slowly drains energy, creating a permanent state of unrest. Most people live in a constant state of resistance without even realizing it. They resist delays, unexpected inconveniences, unwanted outcomes. They resist the way others behave, the things they cannot control, the imperfections in daily life. Their resistance does not change reality, it only exhausts them. The strongest individuals have mastered something that most overlook: the ability to micro-surrender. Letting go in real time, in the smallest moments, before tension accumulates. Resistance is the reason small things turn into big problems. It is why minor inconveniences ruin entire days. It is why a single moment of frustration lingers long after the event has passed. When resistance is present, every disruption feels like an attack. Every challenge feels like a struggle. Every obstacle feels personal. But those who have trained themselves in non-resistance experience life differently. They do not waste energy fighting what already exists. They do not create unnecessary suffering by mentally rejecting what is happening. They do not allow small problems to take control of their emotions. Letting go is often misunderstood. It is not passivity. It is not weakness. It is not indifference. It is the choice to release unnecessary struggle, to stop adding layers of frustration to what is already happening, to meet reality as it is, without the extra weight of resistance. Most suffering does not come from events themselves. It comes from the refusal to accept them. A traffic jam is just cars on the road. A delayed response is just time passing. A difficult person is just another human being acting according to their own nature. But the mind turns these neutral facts into personal battles. It creates anger where none is needed. It builds frustration where none is useful. It fights what is already unchangeable, making every moment harder than it needs to be. Micro-surrendering is the practice of dropping resistance in real time. It is not something done once. It is a skill applied constantly. It happens in the middle of everyday moments, in conversations, in interactions, in the flow of daily life. It is noticing the rising tension and choosing not to engage with it. It is feeling irritation begin and deciding to let it pass instead of fueling it. It is seeing an outcome unfold differently than expected and not demanding that it be any other way. Most waste years fighting things they cannot change. They carry resentment for events that are long over. They hold on to anger over minor inconveniences. They replay conflicts in their minds, keeping old wounds open. They resist, never realizing that the only thing they are truly fighting is themselves. The strongest minds have mastered the ability to let go before the weight accumulates. They do not let tension build. They do not allow small problems to grow into mental burdens. They release each moment as it passes, never letting unnecessary stress take hold. This practice is not about avoidance. It is not about ignoring problems. It is about eliminating pointless resistance. It is about understanding that not every battle needs to be fought. Not every frustration needs to be engaged with. Not every irritation deserves attention. When people learn this, they become light. They move through life without dragging the past with them. They do not allow daily struggles to stack on top of each other, creating layers of unresolved frustration. They meet each moment as it is, then they release it. Most believe that control leads to peace, that the more they manage, plan, and force, the more stable life will be. But the truth is that control is an illusion. There will always be unexpected changes. There will always be people who do not behave as expected. There will always be situations that unfold differently than planned. The difference between those who remain at peace and those who live in stress is resistance. Those who resist suffer. Those who let go move forward. Letting go does not mean giving up. It means knowing when effort is useful and when it is wasted. It means accepting without attachment. It means realizing that holding on to frustration does not fix anything. It means recognizing that clinging to a version of reality that does not exist only creates pain. Most frustration comes from a single false belief, The idea that things should be different than they are, that people should act differently, that life should unfold according to plan. But these expectations create suffering. Life is not obligated to follow personal preferences. People are not required to behave in ways that make sense to others. The strongest minds understand this, and because of that, they do not waste energy resisting. They adapt. They adjust. They let go of the version of reality they wanted and fully engage with the one that exists. Micro-surrendering is what keeps frustration from accumulating. It is what prevents small problems from turning into lasting emotional burdens. It is what allows a person to remain centered even in chaos. When resistance is dropped, life becomes easier, not because external problems disappear, but because they are no longer turned into internal battles. Most people live with a constant undercurrent of frustration, reacting to everything, always on edge. But those who master non-resistance move through the same world with ease. They are not disturbed by delays, not angered by small inconveniences, not weighed down by uncontrollable events. They do not demand that every detail be perfect. They do not attach their emotions to things beyond their influence. They remain still, even when the world around them is chaotic. Letting go in small moments may seem insignificant, but it is the foundation of lasting peace. A person who cannot drop resistance in minor situations will be overwhelmed in major ones. A person who lets frustration build over small delays will break under real pressure. A person who allows every irritation to take hold will live in constant emotional exhaustion. Non-resistance is not weakness. It is mastery. It is the ability to see things clearly without reacting blindly. It is the ability to meet life as it is, without demanding that it conform to personal expectations. It is the ability to release tension before it becomes suffering. It is the ability to move through the world without carrying every inconvenience. The strongest minds are not the ones that fight the most battles. They are the ones that know which battles are worth fighting. They do not engage in pointless struggles. They do not resist what cannot be changed. They do not waste energy trying to force things into alignment. Instead, they master the art of letting go. They release what does not serve them. They surrender to the reality of each moment. And because of that, they move through life with an ease that others will never know. Micro-surrendering is not a single action. It is a habit, a way of thinking, a mental skill that once developed changes everything. It is what separates those who live in stress from those who live in peace. Those who resist everything will always be exhausted. Those who learn to let go will always be free. And in the end, freedom is not about controlling the world. It is about no longer needing to. Letting go in small moments is what prevents resistance from accumulating. But releasing tension is not the same as weakness. It is not about surrendering to life passively. It is about choosing when to apply force and when to conserve it. True strength is not about constant pressure. It is about knowing when to push, when to endure, and when to step back. It is about elasticity, the ability to expand and contract mental strength at will. Most people misunderstand resilience. They assume it means always being strong, always fighting, always pushing forward no matter what. But this kind of unyielding force is not true strength. It is rigidity, and rigidity breaks under pressure. The mind that cannot bend, that cannot adjust, that does not know how to modulate its resilience, eventually snaps. The strongest minds are not those that resist everything, but those that know when to tighten and when to loosen their grip. The greatest warriors, thinkers, and leaders in history did not exhaust themselves fighting every battle with full force. They understood that different challenges require different levels of effort. They did not approach minor obstacles with the same intensity as life-threatening ones. They did not waste energy where it was not needed. They expanded their strength when necessary and contracted it when it was wise to conserve energy. This is Stoic elasticity, the ability to stretch when tested, then recover without carrying unnecessary strain. Most suffer because they do not understand this balance. They apply the same level of intensity to every situation, draining themselves on things that do not deserve that much effort. They overreact to minor problems, treating small inconveniences like major crises. They exhaust their mental energy fighting meaningless battles, leaving nothing for moments that truly demand resilience. They do not know how to adjust. Resilience is not about being unbreakable. It is about being adaptable. Those who can expand and contract their mental strength when needed are the ones who endure the longest. They do not waste effort when it is unnecessary, but they also do not collapse when true challenges arise. They have trained themselves to calibrate their response to fit the situation. They do not spend energy on things that do not matter, but when something does matter, they bring full force. This is where most people go wrong. They assume that being tough means never yielding. They treat every setback, every inconvenience, every disagreement as a battle. But real strength is not in constant resistance. It's in knowing when to hold firm and when to let go. If every small frustration is met with full force, exhaustion is inevitable. If every challenge is met with maximum resistance, burnout is guaranteed. The Stoics mastered this balance. They did not fight reality, they worked with it. They did not exhaust themselves over things beyond their control. They saved their strength for what mattered. They understood that energy is a resource, not something to be wasted. And because of this, they remained composed where others burned out. They endured where others collapsed. They adapted where others resisted and broke. Mental strength should be flexible, not rigid. A tree that cannot bend in the wind will snap. A mind that cannot adjust to difficulty will crumble. A person who cannot regulate their own resilience will either be too soft when strength is needed or too tense when relaxation is required. The strongest individuals know when to push and when to recover. They do not mistake exhaustion for hard work. They do not mistake unnecessary suffering for resilience. There are moments that require complete mental force, moments where all energy must be directed toward endurance, discipline, and control. But there are also moments where relaxing, stepping back, and contracting strength is the right choice. The ability to recognize these moments is what separates those who thrive from those who burn out. Most will never develop this skill because they assume that more force always equals more strength. But force, when applied carelessly, is just wasted effort. Pushing against something that cannot be moved is not resilience. It is foolishness. Fighting every battle with the same intensity is not endurance. It is lack of strategy. The greatest minds understand this, and because of that, they never waste strength where it is not needed. Resilience should be like breathing, expansion and contraction, pressure and release. Strength applied when necessary, withdrawn when unnecessary. A mind that is constantly under pressure eventually collapses. A mind that knows how to alternate between strength and stillness lasts a lifetime. Most people think burnout comes from too much work, too much stress, too many challenges. But it actually comes from never adjusting the level of effort. It comes from applying the same level of tension to everything. It comes from not knowing when to pull back. True endurance does not come from pushing non-stop. It comes from knowing when to rest, when to let go, when to release tension before it builds up. The Stoics practiced this through controlled hardship. They chose their struggles rather than letting struggles choose them. They placed themselves in situations that required strength so that they could control when and how they expanded their resilience. They did not wait for difficulty to appear, they trained for it in advance. And because of this, they remained strong when others collapsed. Elasticity is a skill that must be trained. It requires awareness. It requires the ability to step back and assess. Does this situation require full force, or is this a moment to relax? It requires learning to tune resilience like an instrument. Too much tension and the strings break. Too little tension and the music is weak. The perfect balance is what creates strength that lasts. Most have never trained this ability, so they are always either too rigid or too weak. They push themselves too hard and collapse, or they avoid challenge altogether and remain fragile. They do not understand that mental strength is about control, not just endurance. It is about strategic application of effort. Those who master this principle are untouchable. They do not waste strength on pointless struggles. They do not burn out over small obstacles. They do not let minor inconveniences drain them. But when life demands full strength, they rise without hesitation. They expand their resilience when necessary, then recover without carrying unnecessary strain. This is how true resilience is built, not by forcing oneself to always be strong, but by learning to use strength wisely, not by fighting everything, but by choosing battles carefully, not by enduring blindly, but by knowing when to push forward and when to conserve energy. Most will never learn this because they mistake exhaustion for toughness. They think that pushing through everything is the sign of strength. But strength is knowing when to push and when to pause. It is knowing when to apply force and when to step back. It is knowing that resilience is not about suffering. It is about strategic endurance. The mind that cannot adjust, that cannot regulate its own strength, will always be at war with itself. It will either burn out or remain too soft to handle life's real challenges. But the mind that can stretch and recover at will, that can expand and contract strength when necessary, becomes something unbreakable. The Stoics understood this. They practiced it. They lived by it. And because of this, they remained calm in chaos, unshaken by difficulty, untouchable in adversity. They did not waste energy. They did not resist unnecessarily. They did not exhaust themselves in battles that did not matter. But when real challenge arrived, they were ready, because they had trained for it. Expanding and contracting mental strength is what makes resilience sustainable. The ability to apply force when needed and withdraw when necessary prevents exhaustion and ensures control over energy. But there is an even greater skill that determines power in every situation: the ability to not react. People waste strength not just by fighting unnecessary battles, but by engaging in conflicts that demand their attention, not their response. The greatest power is not in retaliation. It is not in proving a point. It is in silence, strategic, controlled, and deliberate. Most believe that reacting shows dominance, that quick responses demonstrate intelligence, that defending oneself in every situation proves strength. But the opposite is true. Reactivity is weakness. It shows that emotions are easily provoked, that buttons can be pushed, that control lies outside of oneself. A person who reacts to everything is predictable, manipulable, and emotionally vulnerable. They can be dragged into pointless arguments, forced into defensive positions, and tricked into revealing their weaknesses. Their emotions are public property. Anyone can access them, provoke them, and dictate their state of mind. The strongest individuals do not waste energy explaining themselves, proving their worth, or responding to provocations. They understand that silence is the ultimate power move. It creates mystery. It forces the other person to overthink. It shifts control away from the one who speaks and gives it to the one who withholds. It makes people doubt themselves, wonder what is being thought, and feel the weight of their own words without receiving immediate validation or correction. Most people react out of habit. They feel the need to defend themselves when criticized. They explain their reasoning when questioned. They engage when provoked. But the problem with reaction is that it places power in the hands of others. It shows that external forces control internal states. It exposes insecurity. It gives away leverage. Those who cannot control their response become slaves to external influence. Not reacting is not about passivity. It is about deliberate restraint. It is about recognizing when engagement is pointless, when silence is the better weapon, when allowing the other person to talk themselves into weakness is the best strategy. It is about forcing people to deal with their own discomfort rather than easing it with your reaction. A person who cannot be provoked is feared. They are difficult to manipulate, impossible to control, unreadable in their intentions. They force others to reveal more than they themselves reveal. They do not need to prove themselves because their presence alone commands respect. They do not need to respond to every insult because they understand that silence often humiliates more than words. Most conflicts are won before they begin, not by striking first, but by creating uncertainty, by making the other person second-guess themselves, by forcing them to fill the silence with their own words, their own assumptions, their own insecurities. A person who remains silent in confrontation forces the opponent into mental exhaustion. The one who speaks first often reveals their weakness. The one who speaks out of discomfort often exposes their fears. The one who cannot remain still loses control. People crave validation. They want to be acknowledged, understood, responded to. This is why silence is so powerful. It denies them that satisfaction. It forces them to question themselves. It creates an imbalance where one side is stable and the other is scrambling to fill the gap. It places the weight of discomfort onto the other person, making them feel uneasy, uncertain, and exposed. Most do not realize how much power they give away by reacting. They assume that responding is strength, but it is often the exact opposite. The more you explain, the weaker your position. The more you justify, the less authority you have. The more you react, the easier you are to manipulate. Those who remain silent are unreadable. They create doubt without lifting a finger. They control the emotional energy of the room without saying a word. They make people reveal themselves first, exposing weaknesses before deciding whether to engage at all. This is not avoidance, it is strategic dominance. To master non-reaction is to master control. It is to recognize that most conflicts are traps designed to extract energy, attention, and emotional responses. It is to understand that engaging with every challenge is not a sign of power, but of insecurity. The greatest leverage is held by the one who does not flinch, does not respond, does not allow others to dictate their emotional state. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. They rush to fill it. They over-explain, overreact, over-justify. They feel exposed when they are not responding, but those who understand the power of intentional silence use it as a tool. They do not reveal thoughts unnecessarily. They do not offer emotional access freely. They do not waste words when words are not required. And because of this, they are always in control. Authority is not in volume, it is in restraint. The moment a person learns to withdraw reaction, they take control of every interaction. They stop feeding unnecessary conflicts. They stop explaining themselves to people who do not deserve explanations. They stop allowing small provocations to dictate their mood. They become untouchable. The ability to remain silent is one of the rarest skills because it goes against instinct. It requires self-discipline. It requires confidence. It requires knowing that words are often weapons, but the greatest weapon is the absence of them. A person who speaks less is listened to more. A person who reacts less is respected more. A person who does not engage in emotional traps cannot be controlled. The world is full of noise, full of those who speak before they think, full of those who react before they assess. But the few who practice calculated silence stand above the rest. They are the ones who dictate the tone of every conversation, the pace of every conflict, the outcome of every exchange. There is strength in words, but there is greater strength in knowing when not to use them. The ones who react the least control the most. And in a world where most are eager to prove themselves, the one who doesn't react becomes the one who holds all the power. Mastering the power of silence means mastering control. The ability to not react in moments of conflict places the advantage in the hands of those who can endure discomfort without revealing weakness. But non-reaction alone is not enough. Strength is not just about withholding. It is about being prepared for what the world will throw at you. The ability to remain composed, to face hardship without crumbling, to endure discomfort without panic, comes from one thing: training for the unexpected. The difference between those who collapse under pressure and those who thrive in it is simple: preparation. Most people go through life reacting to challenges as they come, hoping they will be strong enough when difficulty arrives. But hoping is not a strategy. Strength is not something that appears in the moment. It is something built long before it is needed. The mind that has been tested in controlled adversity does not fear the unknown. It does not hesitate in crisis. It does not waste time adjusting to hardship because it has already faced it, already conquered it, already trained for it. The Stoics did not wait for hardship to come to them. They sought it out. They understood that discomfort, if faced voluntarily, loses its power. They knew that suffering is not what weakens people. Being unprepared for suffering is. So they trained for the unexpected. They embraced voluntary discomfort, not because they enjoyed suffering, but because they knew a mind that has already suffered by choice cannot be broken by force. Most people live in fear of difficulty because they have never confronted it on their own terms. They avoid discomfort, seek ease, and build a life where they never have to endure more than what is necessary. But avoidance does not eliminate hardship. It only makes a person more fragile. The body that is never pushed becomes weak. The mind that is never tested becomes soft. The spirit that is never challenged becomes brittle. Those who never train for difficulty are paralyzed when it arrives. The strongest individuals deliberately create controlled hardship. They do not wait for struggle to come to them. They meet it first, so it has nothing left to teach them. They practice discomfort in small ways, training the mind and body to endure what others would break under. They fast when they do not have to. They push their bodies when comfort would be easier. They strip away luxuries to remind themselves that they do not need them. They make life harder on purpose, so that when real hardship arrives, they are already stronger than it is. This is not self-punishment. It is strategic. It is the choice to build resilience before resilience is required. It is the difference between those who crumble in crisis and those who face it with composure. The man who has gone hungry by choice does not panic when food is scarce. The person who has lived without comfort does not fear discomfort. The one who has faced pain voluntarily does not flinch when pain comes uninvited. Most people assume that training only applies to physical strength, but the mind requires the same conditioning. Just as a body that is never challenged becomes weak, a mind that is never pushed remains fragile. The Stoics understood that true power comes from exposure to difficulty, not avoidance of it. They did not want to simply survive hardship. They wanted to become immune to it. The key to this is controlled suffering, small doses of adversity, applied regularly to build an unshakable foundation. The person who trains themselves in discomfort does not fear it. They do not complain when things do not go their way. They do not lose control when conditions change. They adapt instantly because they have already faced worse on their own terms. Most people assume they will rise to the occasion when hardship arrives, but the truth is that people do not rise to the level of their expectations. They fall to the level of their training. If they have not conditioned themselves for discomfort, they will not handle it well when it comes. If they have not practiced surviving without luxuries, they will feel lost when those luxuries disappear. If they have never placed themselves in controlled struggle, they will be powerless in real struggle. This is why the strongest minds practice voluntary adversity. They expose themselves to cold, hunger, fatigue, discomfort, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they refuse to be weakened by it. They understand that life does not care about comfort. That difficulty does not announce itself before it arrives. That waiting to be tested is the mistake that breaks most people. To train for the unexpected is to become unbreakable. To eliminate the fear of discomfort is to become untouchable. A person who has already experienced controlled hardship does not fear what the world will throw at them. They do not need reassurance. They do not panic in crisis. They do not waste time adjusting. They are already ready. Most people underestimate the power of preparation. They assume that they will figure things out when the time comes. But difficulty does not wait. It does not give people time to get stronger. It arrives suddenly, violently, without warning. Those who have not trained for it are caught off guard. Those who have step forward with calm. The best way to eliminate fear is to face what you fear before it controls you. The best way to eliminate weakness is to expose yourself to discomfort before life does it for you. The best way to prepare for the unexpected is to create it in controlled conditions so that when reality brings it, it is nothing new. Most people never do this. They prefer comfort. They assume they are strong enough without testing that assumption. They tell themselves they will figure it out when necessary, but by the time difficulty arrives, it's too late to start training. The only ones who thrive in crisis are those who prepared for it long before it came. The Stoics trained in suffering not because they wanted to suffer, but because they wanted to be stronger than suffering itself. They practiced discomfort because they knew weakness is a choice. They exposed themselves to hardship because they refused to be controlled by it. A person who has trained for adversity does not flinch in chaos. They do not panic when things go wrong. They do not lose their composure when the unexpected happens. They step forward, unfazed, because they have already conquered worse. This is the difference between those who fear difficulty and those who master it. The weak hope for an easy life. The strong prepare for a hard one. The weak avoid struggle. The strong train for it. The weak wait for strength to appear. The strong build it themselves. Life does not care who is ready. It does not reward those who waited. It favors those who trained in advance, those who practiced discomfort, embraced hardship, conditioned their minds to endure without complaint. Those who treated difficulty as a teacher rather than an enemy. This is what separates the fragile from the powerful, the untested from the prepared, the ones who wait for life to break them from the ones who break themselves first to become indestructible. The ability to endure hardship without breaking is what separates those who thrive from those who collapse. But preparation for difficulty is not only about physical resilience or mental toughness. It is about understanding the battlefield of the mind. The strongest individuals are not just unbreakable in crisis, they are unshakable in perception. They see through deception, read people with precision, and understand motivations before they are revealed. But this skill does not come from studying others first. It comes from understanding oneself. Most people believe that reading others is about observation, analyzing behavior, or decoding external cues. But true perception does not start outward. It starts inward. The reason people misjudge others, fall for manipulation, or misunderstand intent is because they do not understand their own mind. They project their own fears, assumptions, and biases onto others without realizing it. They see what they want to see rather than what is actually there. They interpret actions through their own unresolved emotions, filtering reality through personal distortions. The mind is a mirror. What a person perceives in others is often a reflection of what they have not yet confronted within themselves. A person who is insecure assumes that others are constantly judging them. A person who's deceitful believes others are lying. A person who's easily offended assumes that every comment is an attack. The world is not seen as it is seen as the person is. Those who master self-awareness remove these distortions. They recognize their own patterns, so they do not mistake them for external truths. They are not fooled by their own projections, so they can see others clearly. They understand their weaknesses, so they are not easily manipulated through them. They read people not by analyzing behavior alone, but by understanding the structure of human thought, starting with their own. Most people walk through life with a blind spot, themselves. They analyze others in depth, but fail to analyze their own reactions, assumptions, and impulses. They do not question why they react emotionally, why they feel threatened in certain situations, why they repeat patterns in relationships and interactions. And because of this, they are easily deceived, not just by others, but by their own minds. To read people effectively, one must first remove the fog from their own vision. They must recognize their biases before assuming they are seeing objectively. They must learn their emotional triggers before believing their judgments are rational. They must dismantle their own illusions before claiming to understand reality. A person who does not know themselves is easy to mislead. They believe what aligns with their existing beliefs. They accept what fits their emotions. They react based on feelings rather than facts. But those who have confronted themselves, stripped away self-delusion, and faced their own mind with honesty cannot be fooled. They see beyond words. They recognize hidden motivations. They understand what is really being communicated, not just what is being said. Self-awareness is not just about understanding personal emotions. It is about developing psychological immunity. When a person knows themselves deeply, they become immune to manipulation. They recognize when someone is appealing to their fears. They notice when emotions are being used to sway judgment. They see through false sincerity, hidden intentions, and disguised hostility. They do not take things personally because they understand what is theirs and what belongs to others. Most people assume they are rational, But unless they have deeply examined themselves, they are operating through unseen filters. The emotions they have not processed cloud their perception. The insecurities they have not resolved shape their interactions. The fears they have not faced dictate their reactions. And because they have not looked in the mirror, they assume what they see in others is objective reality. A person who has mastered self-awareness has removed these distortions. They no longer assume that their fears are facts. They do not react impulsively because they have studied their own impulses. They do not let emotions override logic because they understand where their emotions come from. And because of this, they see others clearly. To understand people, one must first understand human nature, not just in theory, but in oneself. How does fear influence thought? How does ego distort perception? How does insecurity shape relationships? These questions must be answered internally before they can be answered externally. Those who do not study themselves will never fully understand the behavior of others because they do not understand the root from which all human behavior grows. The mind itself. Most will never do this work. It is easier to focus outward, to analyze others without questioning oneself, to assume that problems exist outside rather than within. But the few who turn inward first, who strip away their own illusions before trying to see through the illusions of others, become masters of perception. They do not react defensively because they understand where their own triggers come from. They do not overanalyze because they have trained themselves to recognize what is real and what is projection. They do not take offense easily because they know that most people act from their own wounds, not from true malice. They do not fall for manipulation because they have already studied their own weaknesses and removed them as weapons that could be used against them. A person who truly understands themselves can predict behavior in others with remarkable accuracy. They can see, in real time, what is motivating an interaction. They can tell when someone is acting out of fear, when someone is seeking validation, when someone is posturing rather than speaking honestly. They can sense discomfort before it is expressed, detect deception before it is revealed, and anticipate actions before they are taken. This is not intuition. It is not a mystical ability. It is a skill, built through self-examination, sharpened through honesty, and perfected through deep understanding. The best negotiators, the most effective leaders, the strongest minds, all share one thing. They understand themselves so completely that they are never confused by others. Most people are trapped in their own thoughts, ruled by their own emotions, misled by their own assumptions. But those who have inverted the mirror and confronted their own mind with absolute clarity operate on a completely different level. They do not need to guess what someone else is thinking. They already understand how the mind constructs thoughts. They do not struggle to read a person's emotions. They have already mapped out the emotional blueprint of the human experience. They do not need constant validation from others because they have already validated themselves. The deeper a person understands their own mind, the more clearly they see the world. They move through life without deception, without misinterpretation, without the burden of false perception. They see what is actually there, not what their emotions want them to see, not what their biases allow them to see, but reality itself. To understand others, one must first remove the illusions within themselves. To read people accurately, one must first read themselves without self-deception. To master perception, one must first master self-awareness. This is the secret few ever discover. Those who master it cannot be manipulated, cannot be misled, cannot be emotionally controlled. They see with perfect clarity not just what others present, but what they are trying to hide. And once a person reaches that level of understanding, they control every interaction before it even begins. Understanding oneself removes distortion, allowing a person to read others with clarity. But even the sharpest perception is useless without the ability to adapt. Life is not a controlled environment. It is unpredictable, shifting, and often indifferent to expectations. The ability to see clearly is powerful, but it is not enough. One must also know how to move through uncertainty without being thrown off balance. True mastery is not about eliminating chaos. It's about navigating it with precision. The paradox of control is that it's only fully achieved when one learns to let go. Most people live in a constant battle with uncertainty. They plan excessively, trying to secure an outcome that fits their expectations. They resist change, clinging to stability even when it no longer serves them. They fight against reality, demanding that life conform to their will. But this is the fastest way to lose control. The world is not something to be dominated. It is something to be understood, flowed with, and influenced strategically. The strongest individuals have mastered a skill that few even recognize: the ability to balance flow and control simultaneously. They do not resist change, nor do they surrender to it completely. They do not force rigid plans, nor do they drift aimlessly. They move with precision, knowing when to hold firm and when to bend. They control what is controllable, and they release what is not. This balance is the key to navigating an unpredictable world without being consumed by it. Most think of control as force, as overpowering circumstances, bending reality, forcing outcomes. But this is not true control. The more one forces, the more resistance they create. The more one demands, the more fragile their position becomes. The more one insists on a single path, the more likely they are to collapse when things do not go as planned. The illusion of control is thinking that power comes from rigid structure. But real power comes from adaptability, knowing when to direct and when to let go. Flexibility without discipline is chaos. It leads to inconsistency, lack of direction, and inability to commit. But discipline without flexibility is fragility. It creates rigidity that snaps under pressure, plans that fall apart at the first sign of change. The strongest people master both. They train themselves to be firm and fluid at the same time. This is where most people struggle. They think they must choose between order and adaptability, between structure and spontaneity. But true strength is in holding both at once. The greatest warriors, strategists, and thinkers in history didn't cling to fixed plans. They adjusted without losing direction. They navigated uncertainty without losing control of themselves. They mastered discipline without becoming rigid. This is the paradox few understand. To be in control, one must first stop grasping for it. The harder one tries to dominate every detail, the more unstable their position becomes. Those who force control panic when things shift. Those who understand flow adjust instantly. They are never thrown off because they never expected things to stay the same. They do not waste energy resisting change. They anticipate it, work with it, use it to their advantage. Most suffering comes from fighting reality. People expect things to go according to plan. They believe effort guarantees results. They assume that if they do everything right, life will unfold as they wish. But this is delusion. The world is not designed to conform to individual expectations. It moves on its own terms, regardless of personal desires. The person who accepts this instead of fighting it gains a rare kind of freedom. They are not disturbed by the unexpected. They are not shaken by shifts in circumstances. They remain composed because they have trained themselves to operate in uncertainty. The key is knowing what to control and what to release. Trying to control everything is foolish. It creates unnecessary stress, wastes energy, and leads to constant frustration. But releasing everything is weakness. It leads to aimlessness, lack of ambition, a passive existence dictated by external forces. True mastery lies in choosing wisely, controlling only what matters, releasing what does not, directing effort where it is useful, withholding it where it is wasted. Most people are either too controlling or too passive. They obsess over details they cannot change or surrender completely, blaming fate for their lack of effort. The few who find balance dominate every situation they enter. They do not waste time resisting the uncontrollable. They do not waste potential by failing to take action. They move strategically, adjusting in real time, always a step ahead. There is an ancient concept that embodies this perfectly, Wu Wei. It means effortless action, moving with rather than against, controlling by aligning, not by forcing. The strongest minds do not overpower reality. They align with it so seamlessly that it seems as if they are always in control. They do not fight change. They anticipate it, adapt to it, master it. Most people waste their lives in unnecessary struggle. They fight against time, refusing to accept its movement. They resist change, hoping things will return to the past. They demand stability, expecting life to pause for their convenience. But life does not pause. Time does not slow down. Change does not wait for permission. Those who try to stop it are crushed. Those who learn to move with it rise above. Mastering flow and control is mental aikido, using the force of external events rather than resisting them, shifting momentum rather than colliding head-on, adjusting but never losing stability. Most will never learn this because they are too attached to the illusion of certainty. They want guarantees. They want control over everything. They want a world that is predictable. But that world does not exist. The only real control is self-control. The only true stability is internal stability. The person who masters their own mind does not need the external world to be predictable. They do not need things to go their way. They're ready for anything because they have trained themselves to adapt to everything. Most are trapped in a cycle of frustration because they have never accepted this truth. They expect people to behave a certain way, and when they do not, they get upset. They expect life to reward effort instantly, and when it does not, they feel cheated. They expect things to stay stable, and when they change, they panic. But this is not reality. Reality is unpredictable. It moves on its own terms, and those who refuse to accept this suffer endlessly. The ones who master flow and control live with a different kind of power. They do not cling to fixed plans, yet they never lack direction. They adjust instantly, but never lose sight of their goals. They control what is in their power, but never fight battles that cannot be won. They do not fear change. They use it. This is what separates those who collapse in uncertainty from those who rise in it. The weak wish for stability. The strong train for unpredictability. The weak demand certainty. The strong embrace the unknown. The weak hold onto the illusion of control. The strong control only what matters and let the rest move as it must. True mastery is not in force. It is not in rigid plans. It is not in resisting change. It is in knowing how to move within uncertainty without losing control of oneself. The strongest individuals are not the ones who fight change, but the ones who master it. The ability to move through uncertainty without losing stability is a rare skill. Those who master it are untouchable, not because they control everything, but because they control themselves. Yet, there is a deeper layer to true independence: freedom from external validation. Most people are not truly free. Their actions, decisions, and emotions are shaped by one thing: the approval of others. They crave recognition. They seek praise. They adjust their behavior to gain acceptance, and in doing so, they give away their power. The Stoics understood this trap. They knew that as long as a person depends on validation, they are not in control of themselves. Their confidence is not real. It is borrowed. Their decisions are not their own. They are influenced. Their happiness is conditional. It exists only when approval is given. This is why they rejected the need for praise, not because they despised recognition, but because they refused to let it dictate their actions. Most people are ruled by public opinion. They fear judgment. They shape their choices around what will be well received. They avoid criticism at all costs, but this comes at a price. They lose themselves. They stop doing what is right and start doing what is popular. They abandon their principles for approval. They seek comfort in being liked rather than strength in being resolute. And in the process, they become prisoners of perception. The problem with external validation is that it is never stable. Praise today turns into criticism tomorrow. Approval is given and taken away based on shifting opinions. The person who relies on it is always at the mercy of others. They are strong when praised, weak when ignored, confident when admired, doubtful when overlooked. Their sense of worth fluctuates because it is not rooted in themselves. It is dependent on the outside world. The Stoic does not chase admiration because they understand that external opinions do not change internal reality. Whether praised or criticized, they remain the same. Whether noticed or ignored, they stay on course. Whether respected or mocked, they do not waver. Their value does not come from being recognized. It comes from being rooted in their own principles. Most will never reach this level. They will continue to seek approval, adjusting their words, their actions, their identity to fit expectations. They will work hard, not because they want to, but because they want applause. They will chase success, not for the sake of mastery, but for the sake of admiration. And because of this, they will always be controlled. True confidence is silent. It does not need reassurance. It does not beg to be seen. It does not crumble when ignored. The strongest individuals are those who act without seeking recognition. They do not need applause to move forward. They do not need validation to feel worthy. They do not depend on admiration to remain firm. The need for praise is a weakness disguised as strength. It appears as motivation, but it is actually dependency. It feels like ambition, but it is actually insecurity. Those who crave admiration are not truly driven. They are just afraid of being unseen. They do not chase excellence for its own sake. They chase it for approval. And because of this, their efforts are never truly their own. The greatest minds in history were often misunderstood. They were criticized, ridiculed, dismissed, but they remained steadfast, not because they were seeking eventual recognition, but because they did not need it. They did what was right, not what was praised. They followed their vision, not public approval. They acted based on principles, not popularity. And because of this, they became unshakable. Most people will never know this freedom. They will live seeking acknowledgement, needing constant reassurance, basing their worth on the opinions of others. But the few who reject this dependency become untouchable. They cannot be manipulated through flattery. They cannot be controlled through criticism. They cannot be swayed by social pressure. Their mind is their own. Their path is their own. Their strength is not conditional, it is absolute. The moment a person stops needing praise, they gain an advantage over nearly everyone around them. They do not waste time seeking approval. They do not fear rejection. They do not hesitate to stand alone. And because of this, they move faster, think clearer, and remain steady where others falter. The world rewards those who seek validation, but it respects those who do not need it. A person who does not crave admiration is rare. A person who is not swayed by public opinion is powerful. A person who acts with full independence is truly free. Most will continue to chase recognition, adjusting themselves to fit expectations. They will work for applause rather than mastery. They will fear obscurity more than failure. They will prioritize being admired over being strong. And, because of this, they will remain trapped in a cycle of dependency. But those who break free from this need become something different. They become immune to the opinions of others. They do not shrink under judgment. They do not alter their path for acceptance. They do not seek recognition because they recognize themselves. This is why the Stoics did not seek praise, because they did not need it. Their sense of worth was internal. Their drive came from within. Their discipline was not fueled by applause, but by purpose. And the moment a person stops seeking praise, they free themselves from the invisible chains of validation. They no longer adjust their thoughts, actions, or decisions to gain approval. They stand firm in their principles, unmoved by opinions, untouched by flattery, unshaken by criticism. But there is a deeper layer to this mastery, the ability to disconnect entirely, not just from the opinions of others, but from the noise of the world itself. The strongest individuals do not just resist external influence, they intentionally withdraw from it. Society demands constant engagement. Attention is pulled in every direction. Social expectations, endless conversations, notifications, news cycles, opinions. The mind is never at rest. Most people never experience true clarity because they are never alone with their thoughts. They are always consuming, always reacting, always surrounded by external noise. This is why so many struggle with focus, emotional stability, and decision-making. Their mind is never given time to reset. The Stoics understood that withdrawal is not weakness, it is purification. Temporary isolation is not about rejecting the world, but about recalibrating the mind. Just as the body benefits from fasting, the mind benefits from periods of intentional solitude. Clarity is not found in constant stimulation, it is found in stillness. Perspective is not sharpened in endless conversation, it is refined in silence. Those who never step back never truly see. Those who never disconnect never fully understand. Most people fear being alone, not because they dislike solitude, but because they are uncomfortable with what they will find in it. They fill every empty moment with distractions to avoid facing their thoughts. They surround themselves with noise to avoid their own mind. They seek constant connection to avoid confronting their weaknesses. But avoidance is not strength. Distraction is not peace. Noise is not wisdom. The strongest minds step back intentionally. They do not fear silence, they seek it. They do not drown in social expectations. They remove themselves from them. They do not let the world dictate their thoughts. They create space to think for themselves. This is social fasting, deliberate withdrawal to regain control over attention, perception, and self-awareness. Most people assume that connection is always good, that constant engagement is necessary, that being alone is a problem. But forced connection is not strength, it is dependence. A person who cannot be alone is not truly free. A person who needs constant engagement does not have control over their own mind. They are ruled by external influence, shaped by social pressure, directed by the opinions of others. They do not know what they truly think, because they have never given themselves the space to discover it. The ones who master social fasting see through distractions. They recognize how much time, energy, and clarity is wasted in unnecessary engagement. They understand that most conversations do not add value, that most interactions do not bring wisdom, that most opinions do not deserve attention. They step back, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. They know that true power does not come from being seen everywhere. It comes from knowing when to disappear. Most people believe that stepping away means losing relevance, that silence means being forgotten, that withdrawal means weakness. But the opposite is true. The most powerful individuals are not the ones who are constantly available, constantly engaged, constantly reacting. They are the ones who know how to control their presence. They appear when necessary. They withdraw when needed. And because of this, when they do speak, act, or return, their presence is felt more deeply. The mind, when constantly overstimulated, loses its ability to think clearly. It becomes clouded with external input. It reacts instead of reflecting. It absorbs instead of analyzing. Those who never give themselves space to think are always operating on borrowed perspectives. They are not leading their own minds. They are being led. Social fasting is not permanent isolation. It is a strategic retreat to regain power over perception. It is stepping back, not to disconnect from the world entirely, but to return to it sharper, stronger, and more self-possessed. The ones who do this regularly are never overwhelmed. They are never pulled in directions they do not choose. They are never lost in external noise. Most people struggle with decision-making because their thoughts are not truly their own. They have absorbed too much external influence, listened to too many opinions, been conditioned by too many voices. They cannot distinguish what they genuinely believe from what they have been told to believe. This is why stepping back is essential, not to escape, but to reclaim control. A person who regularly withdraws from the world sees the world more clearly. They are not trapped in trends. They are not reactive to social pressure. They are not constantly chasing the next conversation, the next update, the next validation. They understand that most of what people are consumed by is meaningless, and because of this, they focus only on what matters. Most will never do this. They will continue to drown in engagement, mistaking distraction for connection. They will continue to fear silence, mistaking stillness for emptiness. They will continue to be shaped by the world, mistaking constant interaction for strength. But the few who embrace solitude, even temporarily, will experience a power that most never know. The power of a mind unshaken, unpolluted, and untouched by unnecessary influence. The strongest individuals do not fear withdrawal. They use it as a weapon. They step back, not because they are weak, but because they are refining their clarity. They disappear, not because they are lost, but because they are sharpening their edge. They remove themselves from the noise, not because they do not care, but because they refuse to be swept away by meaningless distractions. A person who can master social fasting controls their mental energy. They decide when to engage and when to retreat. They know that withdrawal is not absence, it is recalibration. They know that silence is not invisibility, it is power. And when they do return, they return with absolute focus, absolute clarity, and absolute control. The ability to withdraw from the noise of the world gives clarity. But clarity alone is not enough. Strength is not built in isolation. It is built in preparation for reality. And reality is harsh. Life does not unfold as expected. People betray. Plans fail. Loss is inevitable. Those who do not prepare for this are shattered when it happens. But those who have already faced hardship in the mind before it arrives in reality move through pain unshaken. This is the power of negative visualization. Most people avoid thinking about suffering. They do not want to acknowledge that things will go wrong, that people will disappoint, that circumstances will turn against them. They prefer denial, believing that if they do not think about misfortune, it will not come. But ignorance does not protect, it weakens. Those who refuse to consider worst-case scenarios are not safer. They are more vulnerable. They have built no defenses, created no mental strategies, developed no resilience, and when disaster strikes, they break. The Stoics understood that to fear something is to be controlled by it. The only way to eliminate fear is to face it first, not when it happens, but before. The practice of negative visualization, or premeditation malorum, is not about pessimism. It is about immunity. By intentionally picturing loss, failure, and betrayal, a person defangs their worst fears. They see what could go wrong in vivid detail, not to despair, but to prepare. Most people live under the illusion that life will remain stable, that relationships will last, that their efforts will succeed. But the world does not operate on hope. The unexpected is inevitable. The loss of someone dear, the betrayal of a trusted ally, the collapse of something carefully built. Those who have never mentally rehearsed these moments experience them as a sudden collapse. Those who have trained for them in the mind move through them with unshaken resolve. Negative visualization goes beyond merely considering death. Mortality is an obvious inevitability, but loss extends far beyond physical existence. The betrayal of a friend, the destruction of a reputation, the shattering of an expectation, these can break a person just as easily as death itself. And most people are completely unprepared for them. They assume loyalty lasts forever. They believe effort guarantees reward. They expect life to unfold according to their efforts. And when these illusions collapse, they collapse with them. A mind that has already experienced suffering before it happens is a mind that cannot be broken. The betrayal that was already considered does not sting as deeply. The failure that was already imagined does not paralyze. The loss that was already accepted does not destroy. When a person has mentally walked through devastation before it arrives, they greet it with composure rather than shock. Most people assume that thinking about negative outcomes invites them, but denial is not protection. Those who refuse to think about hardship only make themselves more fragile. They are caught off guard, left scrambling when misfortune arrives. They have no plan, no strategy, no mental framework to handle the unexpected. They do not prepare because they do not want to consider the worst. And because of this, the worst destroys them. Negative visualization is not about dwelling in suffering. It is about training the mind to be untouchable. It is the act of stepping into failure, betrayal, and loss in the mind first, so that when it happens, it has no power left to hurt. It is removing the shock before reality delivers the blow. It is stripping misfortune of its ability to break resolve. It is not pessimism, it is psychological fortification. A person who expects hardship moves through it differently. They do not crumble at betrayal. They had already considered that people are capable of treachery. They do not spiral in loss. They had already accepted that nothing lasts forever. They do not freeze in failure. They had already planned for setbacks. They remain stable, composed, unshaken, not because they are numb, but because they are prepared. Most people rely on hope as their only defense. They tell themselves that things will work out, that people will stay loyal, that effort will always lead to success. But hope is not a strategy. Hope is a weakness when used in place of preparation. A person who has already rehearsed misfortune in their mind does not need hope. They need only execute their plan. This practice does not strip life of joy, it enhances it. The person who regularly considers loss values what they have more deeply. The person who reflects on the possibility of failure works harder and smarter. The person who anticipates betrayal does not waste trust on the undeserving. Negative visualization is not about creating unnecessary suffering. It is about removing unnecessary suffering when hardship inevitably comes. A mind trained in worst-case scenarios does not spiral when things go wrong. It does not react emotionally. It does not waste time in shock or disbelief. It executes. It moves forward. It adapts instantly. It remains firm, even in devastation. And because of this, it commands an advantage over those who remain trapped in illusion. Most will never do this. They will continue to avoid thinking about pain. They will continue to convince themselves that things will always work out. They will continue to believe that misfortune is something that happens to other people. But when reality arrives, it does not care about denial. The only ones who move through it with composure are those who have already faced it before it came. The strongest individuals are not those who never suffer. They are those who have already suffered in the mind before suffering reaches reality. They do not break because they have already shattered and rebuilt themselves long before life ever tested them. And because of this, they are unbreakable. A mind that has already endured suffering before reality delivers the blow does not fear the unexpected. It moves through betrayal, failure, and loss with the steadiness of someone who has already rehearsed every possible outcome. Strength is not found in wishful thinking. It is forged in preparation for adversity. But there is another layer of resilience, one that does not come from proving strength, but from not needing to prove anything at all. The most powerful individuals do not announce their presence. They do not seek admiration. They do not waste energy trying to be impressive. And yet, paradoxically, they command more respect than those who crave recognition. Most people exhaust themselves trying to be noticed. They seek approval, display their achievements, signal intelligence, and push for validation. But those who try hardest to impress are rarely respected. They come across as desperate for recognition, as if their worth is dependent on others acknowledging it. True power does not demand attention. It does not seek to be seen. It does not attempt to prove itself. The more a person tries to look important, the less important they appear. The more effort they put into appearing confident, the less confidence they actually possess. The Stoics understood that real influence is quiet. It does not beg to be acknowledged. It does not posture or force recognition. It exists independent of external validation. A person who is unimpressed by themselves does not need to convince others of their value. They let their actions speak. They let their presence carry weight without effort. They are not concerned with admiration because their focus is on something higher than appearances. Trying to impress others is a weakness disguised as strength. It reveals insecurity, a need to be noticed, a dependence on being liked. The moment a person stops trying to appear impressive, they gain an edge. They conserve energy instead of wasting it on perception management. They do not chase validation. which makes them seem more valuable. They do not seek attention, which makes people wonder why they do not need it. Most people assume that standing out requires doing more talking, more signaling, more proving, more effort. But the reality is the opposite. The ones who are most respected are those who are selective with their presence, who do not force themselves into the spotlight, who do not attempt to manipulate perception. When they do speak, people listen. When they do act, people notice. They do not have to demand respect because they already embody it. A person who constantly tries to be impressive is controlled by others. Their mood depends on recognition. Their decisions are shaped by approval. Their confidence rises and falls based on how they are perceived. But those who abandon the need to impress operate with complete autonomy. They are free to move as they choose, unaffected by opinions, undistracted by the need for recognition. The strongest minds are often the least outwardly remarkable. They do not flaunt their intelligence. They do not advertise their status. They do not dress their speech in unnecessary complexity to seem profound. They do not overshare their accomplishments to gain admiration, and because of this, they become mysterious, unpredictable, and intriguing. Those who try to impress are easy to read. They expose their need for validation in everything they do. Those who are unimpressive on purpose remain unreadable, and in that, they hold power. Most assume that success and recognition go hand in hand, that influence requires visibility. But those who are the most influential are often the ones who say the least, but act the most. They are not caught in the cycle of proving themselves. They do not seek to be the loudest voice in the room. They do not concern themselves with admiration because they have nothing to prove. And this absence of effort makes them appear stronger than those who push endlessly for validation. A person who seeks to impress is constantly performing. They modify their behavior based on what will gain approval. They adjust their personality to fit expectations. They speak not with substance, but with the hope of admiration. They do not act authentically. They act strategically for recognition. But those who are truly free do not engage in this game. They say what they mean, whether it is liked or not. They act on principle, whether it is noticed or not. They do not need applause to move forward. Unimpressiveness is not about dullness. It is about restraint. It is the ability to hold back when others seek to be seen. It is the confidence to remain silent when others feel the need to prove their intelligence. It is the discipline to act without announcing intentions, to move without seeking acknowledgement, to remain composed while others scramble for attention. And it is this lack of desperation that commands real respect. The moment a person stops caring about admiration, they become magnetic. They do not waste energy on appearances. They do not need to inflate their importance. They do not demand recognition because they know that respect is earned through presence, not through performance. Those who are unimpressive by choice create an aura of mystery. They become unpredictable. They hold attention without seeking it. They control perception by not attempting to manipulate it. Most will never grasp this. They will continue trying to appear powerful rather than actually becoming powerful. They will chase admiration instead of becoming the kind of person who does not need it. They will exhaust themselves in the pursuit of being noticed rather than understanding that true presence does not demand to be seen. The few who embrace this paradox gain an edge that others do not understand. They move without effort. They influence without forcing. They gain respect not because they seek it, but because they operate entirely outside the need for it. And this is why they hold power that most will never achieve. A person who no longer seeks to impress is no longer ruled by short-term validation. Their moves are not dictated by applause, nor are their decisions influenced by fleeting recognition. This detachment from immediate reward grants them something rare, the ability to think in decades, not days. The strongest minds operate on a different timeline than the average person. Where most are chasing quick wins, they are planting seeds that will bear fruit long after others have given up. Most people live reactively. They seek immediate gratification, instant recognition, and fast results. They want success, but they want it now. They want progress, but they refuse to endure the slow compounding effects of consistent effort. They act based on short-term emotions rather than long-term vision. But the ones who shape their lives deliberately, the ones who are truly unshakable, do not play games that can be won in a single move. They play games that unfold over years, over decades. They are grandmasters in patience. The difference between those who struggle and those who dominate is simple. Timeline. The impatient chase short-term wins that disappear as quickly as they arrive. They give up when rewards do not come fast enough. They shift their focus constantly, abandoning long-term goals for temporary pleasures. But those who think long-term are never in a rush. They understand that true mastery, true success, and true influence do not come from fast movements, but from playing the game in a way that others do not even recognize. Most people fail because they expect immediate results. When something does not work instantly, they assume it is not working at all. They jump from one plan to the next, never allowing their efforts to reach full maturity. They start businesses, projects, relationships, and ambitions, only to abandon them when the first signs of resistance appear. They do not understand that nothing great is built quickly, and because of this, they never build anything great. Patience is not passive, it is strategic. It is not about waiting aimlessly, but about making moves today that will pay off tenfold in the future. Those who lack patience waste their energy chasing every new opportunity that promises instant success. Those who possess it commit deeply, endure quietly, and emerge victorious while others burn out. The reason patience is so rare is because the rewards of long-term thinking are invisible at first. There is no immediate gratification, no instant proof that things are working. The progress is slow, almost imperceptible, and this is where most people fail. They quit before the effects of their effort have had time to appear. But the ones who play the longest games do not measure progress by what is seen today. They trust the process, even when it appears to be yielding nothing. Most believe that success is about intensity, about working harder, moving faster, pushing relentlessly. But those who truly dominate understand that success is about duration. It is about who can endure the longest, who can continue when others lose interest, who can maintain focus when distractions appear. The world is filled with people who start strong but collapse midway. The ones who last are the ones who refuse to be rushed. A person who operates on a long timeline is unshakable. They do not panic when setbacks happen because they are not measuring their success in weeks or months, but in years and decades. They do not get distracted by trends because they are not chasing temporary gains, but permanent foundations. They do not break under pressure because they have already accounted for resistance. They are not desperate for immediate validation because they know that real value compounds over time. Most struggle with patience because they only see the effort, not the compounding results. They assume that if something is not producing immediate rewards, it is failing. They look for shortcuts, quick wins, and rapid transformations. But those who build true strength do not think this way. They do not care how long it takes. They do not abandon their principles for faster rewards. They do not sacrifice long-term greatness for short-term pleasure. The Stoics understood that patience is not about waiting, it is about endurance. It is the ability to take action today without expecting results tomorrow. It is the discipline to move forward without reassurance. It is the wisdom to see beyond the moment, beyond the emotions of the present, beyond the need for instant feedback. Those who master this outlast everyone else. Most will never embrace this mindset. They will continue searching for the fastest way to success. They will chase results rather than build foundations. They will expect change overnight and abandon anything that requires prolonged effort. And because of this, they will always be at the mercy of those who think further ahead. The ones who control the world are the ones who move strategically, while others move impulsively. They do not rush, but they also do not stop. They are patient, but never passive. They act deliberately, but they are not in a hurry. And because of this, they are always ahead, even when it looks like they are moving slower. True power is not in speed, but in sustainability. It is not in intensity, but in endurance. It is not in chasing fast results, but in becoming the kind of person who is still playing the game long after others have quit. And that is why the strongest minds always win in the end. Mastering these Stoic lessons is not about temporary inspiration. It is about permanent transformation. It is about stepping out of the cycle of emotional reactivity, breaking free from society's illusions, and becoming the kind of person who controls their mind, their actions, and ultimately, their life. This is not a path for the weak. Most will never detach from the need for approval. Most will never train their minds before hardship arrives. Most will never embrace the power of patience, self-reliance, or strategic withdrawal. But those who do, those who truly apply these lessons, will move through life with a level of calm, confidence, and control that others will never understand. You will no longer seek validation because you will recognize your own worth. You will no longer fear adversity because you will have already faced it in your mind. You will no longer chase shallow distractions because you will be operating on a timeline far beyond the present moment. And most importantly, you will no longer be a prisoner of external forces because you will have built something stronger than circumstance, stronger than opinion, stronger than temporary struggles. You will have built yourself. The world does not hand power to those who beg for it. It rewards those who are disciplined enough to claim it for themselves. And once you master these Stoic lessons, your life will never be the same. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these Stoic lessons hit you the hardest? Drop a comment below and let's build a discussion around these life-changing principles. Your perspective matters, and your insight might help someone else on this journey. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This is just the beginning. There is so much more to learn, so much more to master, and so many more ways to elevate your life. Stay strong, stay sharp, and keep moving forward.